All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Watson, Habitat Program Manager for the Westwood Department of English. We're going to start this off by taking a roll call and seeing what committee members. I'll start with Jeff Arden.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
Jimmy King. Here. John Pierce. Here. Emmanuel S. Ross.
Here.
Mark Walmer.
Here.
Mark Matane. Lee Vaughn.
I'm here.
Ron Loman. Here. And Mark Cadwalder is absent today, but he did get his rankings. So the point of today's meeting is for you all to prioritize this year's presented projects. You all individually ranked these projects and submitted your scores to us. We added all of those to a score sheet, and so we'll show you all that. Actually, let's go ahead and introduce all of our participants.
Caitlin Rule, Wildlife Habitat Restoration Board.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm Mike Rule. I'm the Assistant Chief Fisheries for Research and Management. I probably won't be able to sit in all day today, but my office is occupied, so if I'm not here and there are any questions, somebody can come grab me and I'll be happy to come back.
Bob Norris.
Catherine Kim, I'm the Coordinating Wildlife Biologist for Pheasants Forever Intermountain West Joint Venture and BLM.
And then we have a few online participants. Let's start with Danica Cook.
Good morning, everybody. Danica Cook, wildlife biologist for the Roswell BLM.
Thanks, Danica. And Jen.
Hi, everyone. Jennifer Deanna Bell, the Southwest Habitat Biologist for Game and Fish.
Thanks, Jen. And Juan.
Yeah, good morning. This is Juan with BLM Supervisory Range in Las Cruces.
And Ryan McBee.
Yeah, hi, this is Ryan McBee. I'm the multi-resources supervisor for BLM Farmington Field Office.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone, for being here. So again, you all individually rank these projects already and submit your scores. And so we added them to a sheet here. This is a pretty busy sheet. So let me kind of walk you through what you're seeing here. In this first section, we have each of you listed by name, and under your name is your rankings for each project. So Jeff, for example, this was organized in a sheet called rankings. Let me also share the screen, make sure everyone can see this. I also added a couple of things from last year's sort of discussion. I thought a few things might be helpful. I added a column that shows how many times a project got a rank in the top 5. So for each of you, like if you ranked it in top 5, this counts how many of you did that. Standard deviation is just going to show you how much agreement there is between you on the ranks. And then the average rank just to kind of show where you're at as a room. And then I also added this funding category so that you can all have visual on where the funding will come out. This will only make sense based on how we score it. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is that none of the scores that you guys provided are final. You can change them at any time. And ultimately what we all need to do is, as a group, fill in this column for final rank. So you have to decide how you want to rank this year's projects. Last year, what we did to kind of start this process is we had each individual talk about why they ranked the projects the way that they did. And it seemed like it was pretty informative for the group to understand what everyone thought. So if that sounds good, we can proceed that way. Or if you all have any other way that you want to approach today, we can look at doing that.
I mean, maybe, just going through each project and then asking for comments. I don't know, that way, as an alternative way to proceed.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be more interactive on the
Okay.
project.
We can do it that way. So how about we just organize it by the current average. And so everyone would know this is entirely just an average. It's not final. The funding would run out right around middle colonial barrier, would get some partial funding. So that's just this order that we're talking about right now, has no bearing on the final rank you want to decide. So Whitewater Creek, this one had a whole lot of agreement between all of you, but I guess that we could start with Jimmy and just kind of go around the room.
Yeah, I mean, I rank this one, I supported it for several cycles and. I didn't see any reason to not continue supporting the project. I think for me, because there's such, I mean, at least relative to the north, limited number of places to go cold water fishing in the south. The southern part of the state is part of the reason why I supported it, plus it's easy access.
Okay, I actually turned in written evaluation, so I'll just read the bullet points from that one. I rank this one number 2. The strength I put, this work is required to realize the benefits of past habitat stamp investments. It's one that has high visibility to the public. It's a good cold water fishery project for the southern part of the state. And also that the proposed in-stream techniques are very well established and have been used successfully in other streams. And I didn't see any weaknesses in proposing. So that's why I ranked it higher.
I gave it a 3. I think it's important because there's a lot of people who go and use it. And because there are so many people, there's a lot of damage done. And so if we're going to keep offering it, I think we have to try to keep strengthening and to get the stream flowing better, where people can really fish.
Yeah, I also ranked it for as a 2, and I also agree that it was made mostly because we've been working on it. We've gone through the steps on it, and it's to finish it up and make it a good full water fishery down south. So I thought it was pretty important.
Yeah, I agree. I ranked it top, and I think it has real potential to be a real showpiece for Gila trout and really, introduce a lot of people, extending the range of the stream down there, having the habitat in there that'll, support the fish. It is very, very impactful.
Yeah, I guess I'm the bad guy. My top 5 were pretty much fairly interchangeable, but yeah, I agree with most all the comments. It's ongoing, the PR, the fact, the chance of showing people what their habitat money is going to, because it's right there on the road. And I think it's something you need to continue working on.
I guess I'm just as bad as Lee if I rated the top 5 Addison and primarily because it's not 7. Pretty continuing.
Okay. And then Art.
Well, yeah, I mean, we ranked it really high previously when we funded the design, and I just agree with Jeff that this is like a really important public access for Gila trout, to showcase that fish and easy access, and I think it's just a perfect project for this.
And do we have any public comment on the Whitewater Creek? Oh, yeah, that's right.
Mark Cadwalder provided us with some notes on his rankings, and so he put Whitewater Creek at number 4 and says CAC funded the design of the project and should be used to follow through with the implementation. It's a high profile area and a great opportunity to focus public education on Gila trout enhancement.
Any public comment on Whitewater Creek? And for any folks online, if you want to raise your hand, if you feel like chiming in on it. Otherwise, we could start talking about Black Mesa. We start with Jimmy again.
Yeah, so similar to Whitewater, one of the reasons why I like this size because it's a continuation of project that we funded. I really like this project because it's a large scale, landscape scale project. So even though the piece that's being funded this year is just a part of that, the projects that think bigger and span. At least if they don't span jurisdictional boundaries, they at least tie in with work that other agencies are doing. So the fact that this is going to impact species that use not only the fish property, but foreign service as well. Yeah, overall, I just think it's a good project.
Okay, I like the proposal because it was really well written and it gave good justification for why the things are going to be done. And it had a really good project plan. I thought that the cross-agency collaboration was a big plus. Wildfire prevention in Ponderosa Forest is really important. It's both for the public and for wildlife. The cost of $500 an acre is pretty reasonable. I was once on the collaborative forest restoration program where there's a lot of thinning, and 500 an acre was at the lower end of all the projects we saw. So that's pretty reasonable. I didn't see any weaknesses.
I made it number 2 primarily really because of the fire prevention. And we're really at a point with climate, and climate's going to keep changing. We're not going to have any, not even fish, because in fact fish, this has happened with some of the examples with the blue fish. So for me, I think that and the pieces once I gave the top score. I also live really close to actually.
I ranked it as a 4, and I think it's a pretty important project because of the past history we've been doing. It's not one of the final pieces, but it's a piece that needs to be done so that because we're right on the verge of being able to insert the fire back into that area, and that's the main goal of it, and we're close to it, and we're ready to rock and roll with it.
So my enthusiasm was less, but not that and I think it's a very important project. And, you know, as for all the reasons that have been said, but, you know, I tried to just put on the glasses of having to justify habitat stamp funds spent for this project. What's the public getting out of it? What's your like? And so that's where I came out with the 9 and that out of that 11.
It was my first choice because it's landscape scale. It's an ongoing process that's with a lot of capacity building with it, a lot of partnerships, and I think that's something that's lacked in the past. Working together with agencies that we've not always been friendly with, you know, and I just like the idea that it's growing and growing, and it can continue it over a large piece of property that has a lot of wildlife value in it. So.
Actually, I rated it pretty low, not because of I like the project. I spent most of my life doing field mitigation and fire management, but I believe that there's multiple sources of funding for these types of projects and other alternatives. And I think just need to be better spent. So,
how about you, Art?
Yeah, I rank it down in the middle, mainly because I felt some of the other projects had a little more immediacy, you know, need to get them done. So, you know, I think it's important, but I just felt some of the other ones were a little more urgency involved.
Mark's notes say years of effort invested in this project area, great interagency collaborative effort, tending for future prescribed burns is critical in achieving desired results.
Any public comment on that music?
it's a great project. My question is, Elbar land is not very checkerboard with the Forest Service up there. Is there any intention to block that land up so it's managed by?
I think it,
MC?
yeah, I think that they did a land swap a ways back, so it's all contiguous.
Oh, it's
between-
already been swapped. Okay.
Yeah, between the Elbar, Black Mesa, and Montauk District, and then IC Grand and BLM, it's.
And then my second part of that question is, I assume the game and fish are just beneficiaries and we do a prescribed one. Because we can't use any HSP money for game and fish,
No,
but Forest Service and BLM, they do a burn, we'll just burn across everybody.
yeah, so we're in the middle of exploring that right now for Seven Springs, actually, so there's some miles there. And Forest Service has something that's called the Wyden Authority, which allows them to burn on private lands or state game commission lands. So this will be the first time that our agency has ever used that, but if it works.
It's not the first time.
Oh, well, it's the first that any of us are aware of.
We've grown up there years ago, Forest Service, BLM and Game Department with the Marcus area. And that was the only person I remember, an agency person on that, we've been retired numerous years now, but yeah, it's great concept.
Yeah, so we're hoping that it works out, because for the Elbar, that's what we would need to use, the Forest Service would maybe come on to us. But yeah, so we're exploring that. Any other public comment on Black Mesa? Anyone online? Otherwise, we could start talking about wildlife habitat connectivity.
Yeah, I really like this project. I realize that it's mostly gonna benefit Pronghorn, but I think Pronghorn has been very severely impacted across the state by net wire fence and poorly designed, barbed wire fencing. And I think that it had an added benefit that there were different locations in the state, so depending on where you like to hunt, if you're lucky enough to get drawn for a tag, it could potentially benefit the population you're interested in. And then I think also one of the main things is, unlike a lot of these other projects, the benefits are realized almost immediately after. That's
Okay, just see that I rated this lowest of the ones I reviewed. And that was for several reasons. First of all, I'm new to the committee and I don't know any of the discussion that's gone on in previous years. So I based this entirely on the proposal as presented. And so these are comments on what I know based on the proposal. And strengths are, it identifies net fences as a wildlife risk, and that's pretty obvious. And it integrates with removal work already done, and that was clear in the proposal. The weaknesses that applied for me for all three locations. One is, I didn't see any identification of specific wildlife corridors. I know like in Wyoming, in Yellowstone, they talk about corridors where they know that the wildlife are migrating in particular areas. Here, it just seemed like scattershot. You just want to remove all the fences in some kind of arbitrary order. So that's a weakness for me. I would have liked to have seen a prioritization of particular fencing based on some survey or analysis of where the wildlife will actually we're actually moving. The other thing that didn't come through in the proposal is the responsibilities of the grazing permittees and private landowners relative to the public land management agencies. It looked to me like some of this fencing is, we're spending habitat money to fix or repair fences for private landowners or permittees. And I am really opposed to doing that. The grazing permittees are already getting a huge subsidy by the public. I know in some grazing, not what is it called? The grazing plans that the Forest Service does, the permittees are supposed to provide the fences and maintain them. I've been on volunteer projects where it's Forest Service and volunteers who do it for the permittees, and I don't think that's right. And so for me, I would have liked to have seen discussion of contributions, of participations of landowners or permittees. The other thing that's not in there is who's maintaining the fences now. If these are old sheep fences and nobody's been maintaining them, I would expect a whole lot of them already down and non-functional anyways. If somebody's maintaining them and putting them up as net fencing, why not, when they have to fix them, just put barbed wire there anyways? There should be some kind of a maintenance or long-range plan to do that. And there was nothing in the proposal for that. So, and there's some specific comments for the macho. According to the proposal, 230 miles have already been done of, it was like over half of the total number of them. And they've received $1 million from the infrastructure legislation. So it doesn't seem like extra money to remove a few more miles is much of an impact on what was already done. Taos, they've done 50 of 72 miles that have been identified. 11 more are in progress. So that's 61 of 72. Seems like there's a lot of wildlife corridor open already on that one. The Boot Heel, there's nothing identified, nothing done. And so if any one of those for me would have been done, I would do the Boot Heel ones because it looks like they haven't been addressed before. But again, for the other reasons that I already discussed, that's why I put it low. I'd be happy to hear other reasons why it should be done, but
I've got a couple things that
okay.
more kind of FYI. So there are data on migratory corridors, Taos Plateau, for mule deer elk. And we just completed a barrier analysis that we're going to review on right now. We're going to give it to you guys and BLM. It identifies some specific segments. Some of it's older data, so they've been treated already, and we no longer have the MS collar, but there are other fences that are potentially an issue. There's about 70 follow pronghorn down in Boot Heel right now. We're collecting data on. There's no analysis that's been done on that yet, but you could certainly at least eyeball and prioritize this thing. It's not that all the sheep fence isn't a problem, but if you know there's a known problem, then you can focus first. And then as far as migration, that only applies to tops. Pronghorn and the macho and the Blue Heel are historically going to be nomadic. They don't have seasonal migratory range, so we're following that sequence. And so you're not going to have distinct corridors. You just need a really permanently landscape that problem can explain.
Okay. As a reader of proposals, I would have really liked it in the proposal and not just assume that everybody knows it.
Yeah, I rated it fairly high. First of all, because we got so many fences that we've got to do something about. But really, what pushed me in that direction is it something that really matters to hunters. And hunters give us a lot of money to do the things that we do. And I hear this all the time. BHA people are involved all the time in taking down fences. Just last weekend, they did the L-bar, about 6 miles. They continue and continue. So to me, I think it's not as important as stopping forest fires, but it's important to population there. I think we need to be responsive to, of course, the register. So
I rated it fairly high, and I think I did a 3. And in the beginning, years prior, the Taos area was doing data, they were collecting data, and that helped with formulate,
what's been going on up there and backed up what was happening. And like the Macho, in years prior, you know, I had asked about data, you know, I wanted to see data. And it hadn't been collected. You know, they've done a lot of effort, but it was never collected. Or at least that I know of. But recently, I believe they've jumped on board on that, like Jimmy alluded to, is, you know, they know we want data. We want to know what's happening. But unfortunately, to get that data first, being nomadic down in those areas, it's not as easy. But as it's opened up and as if they're collecting the data, like they're doing in the Boot Hill area there, we can start honing in and pinpointing locations that might help. And that wire, that fence, sheep wire has an amazing longevity. You know, it seems to stand up and nothing really breaks it down unless the posts break, you know, and recently I've been looking into the issues about the fences and things, and there's nothing in the grazing stuff, allotments that says they have to, when they have, you know, they have to do something to it, they maintain the fences, but there is stuff in there saying that they will allow us to be able to change the fences. You know, that's specifically in there, at least in the BLM I read. And that's the only stipulation I found in it. So, but all in all, it's really important for us to have an environment, no doubt about it.
So it's in my top 5. I really like the instant benefit of the replacement. I think, you know, doing the work that, you know, in the 3 areas, all justifiable. It's nice to see it happen in the Boot Hill too. And I think the, you know, way that it's collaborative in the sense of, you know, attracting interest and participation from multiple organizations is very positive. Good.
I rated it pretty high, and Jimmy hit on a lot of the things that I think about after years of working for the game department and hundreds of hours of antelope surveys over years and years, and watching different climate patterns or different weather patterns. Corridors to me is relative. You can have corridors that what we think about migrating corridors, but even you called it nomadic, but those are still corridors because rain in the Southwest is sporadic and spotty. And you can have a lot of rain over here and go over 10 miles and it's dry and desolate. And if there's a fence there, then you're cutting off that population from forage and water. And the more open that entire range is, the more chance you have for more animals. I've heard it so many times, well, there's no antelope this year. Well, no, that's because they're over here. And we went out and we counted 20,000 antelope in the Northeast area every year. But sometimes they weren't over here and they weren't over here. It all had to do with rain and stuff. And some of it had to do with fences. So I think it's a really good instantaneous benefit project.
I also rated it pretty high, I believe, rated that number 3. Primarily, I thought it was reluctant, I guess, because I believe it's a legacy stuff that we're cleaning up. I believe the permittee should bear some responsibility, but I think that's in the future, perhaps. Start looking at that contracts in the future. And I just believe that it needs to be done, and if somebody's going to do it, we have to do that. We might as well just go and clean it up and bite the bullet, but I really think the permittees need to bear responsibility for that. And I considered the corridors as well. I understand that the logistics of start stopping in the project, like a fence where you just go one continuous stretch, cost wise is probably about the same. So, well, again, we're reluctant to have it.
Art, how about you?
Well, yeah, I've been on the committee for many years now. We see these projects every year and they, you know, I hear the responses from the managers and they seem to be pretty good projects and they seem to work. So, I think it's like Jeff, I think somebody said, there's some immediacy in the impact of getting these projects done. One potential advantage I also see is that since these projects are in 3 distinct areas, that if funding was an issue, we could say fund 2 out of the 3 or 1 out of the 3 or whatever, and get some significant benefit, at least in one or 2 of the 3 areas, if not all of them.
Thank you.
Mark rated this as number 5. Net wire fencing has posed a barrier for many wildlife species for many years across New Mexico. With the demise of the sheep industry in New Mexico, these fences are no longer needed. Replacing with barbed wire is a great project that will benefit big game species. And he listed individual rankings with Macho first, Blue Hill second, and Taos Plateau here.
And we also, for all of you who did that, individual rank of each project, we have that on this sheet there, if that becomes a discussion.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Oh, what fraction of the fencing is on public lands and what fraction is on private?
So for these projects, it's all
All
public, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure what that would look like. There's probably a lot on private lands, but yeah, HSP funds would be also.
And all of the existing fences are part of grazing allotments or any of them abandoned?
All of them, I believe, are active. The permits are active. Any public comment on the connectivity?
Yes. So I explained, my name is Catherine Kim. I'm a coordinating wildlife biologist for the migration corridors in New Mexico. I'm not as familiar with the Boot Hill or Macho, but I am very familiar with the Taos Plateau. The Taos Plateau BLM specifically has been their wildlife, their range, and their engineers work on switching the net wire fences to wildlife friendly fence. The permittees and the landowners are also working on switching their net wire, so that is happening on the Taos Plateau. It's a concern for all parties, but BLM is working with many partners. So you need to understand that there are a lot of collaborators on the Taos Plateau itself. Jimmy's crew has worked on the corridors and mapping the migration corridors, but that net wire fence up there affects not only the pronghorn, but it also affects the elk. And so bringing those fences down to the 42 inches or the 40 inches is going to help the elk. Raising that bottom wire to 16 or 18 inches, depending upon who's funding the fence. Because I have a project up there with Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, who's funding part of it, and they have the 40 and the 18. So it just depends, but that changing those net wire up there is a huge connectivity for the wildlife on the Taos Plateau, not just the ungulates, but also all wildlife. And everybody's on board. We have DOT of RMEF, who have BHA is huge right now, and their volunteers pulling fences. You have PF, Intermountain West Joint Venture, but I just want to make sure that you guys understand that there are numerous partners and everybody is working. And so, as you can tell, that's a very important project from my standpoint. But if you have any questions, I'll sure try to help you.
Question from the numbers that I had written down is only about 10 more miles of the 72 that would need additional funding.
So those miles were the ones that the BLM provided to us. They've identified more net wire since then. But that initial 72 miles that they wanted to partner with us on, that's correct.
Okay.
But there's more. And then there's also, in addition to net wire fence out there, there's also non-wildlife friendly. So it could be 6-strand barbed wire, or it could be fence that's just very high.
They go from 52 to 58 inches.
Okay, and from what we heard last time, when you say wildlife friendly, that's non-barbed wire?
No, so it's barbed wire, the bottom
But the
line
bottom is
is smooth, and the top line, and then the height is limited to 40 or 42 inches.
it's the design. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments on wildlife habitat connectivity? We can go on to Rio de los Blancos.
So my lower ranking for this project, I think it's a great project. My lower ranking had to do with cost. If it had been phased, if pitched as a phased project, it would probably rank a lot higher for me. And I just had some concerns with giving the projects that I ranked higher, as well as I thought some of the importance I placed on some of the other lower cost projects. I was concerned that we were gonna end up partially funding that and not end up funding the other projects. But I think it's a great project. I think it's just that you look at the relative cost of it, it's about half the money that we got.
Okay, actually, I thought it was phased. And I'm not sure which part of the phasing the funding applied, but
This would be for phase 1 and phase 2.
For
It's
phase
probably gonna be a 4-phase project.
okay, all right. Well, this was my top priority. I know the area, so I'm familiar with it. It's the most detailed and specific proposal that we got. And it has discussion of everything that any question that I might have had, and they were all addressed. And it's the first stage of an integrated restoration of Rio de los Blancos, its tributaries and all the riparian areas. And that whole area has been seriously degraded over the years, both by uncontrolled grazing and uncontrolled recreation, ATVs and whatever. So it's a mountain riparian area, cold water streams, but they've all been really degraded. There's a really strong collaboration between Game and Fish and Forest Service within the proposal. The restoration techniques are very well established. They've been applied on the Rio San Antonio, the Rio Cebolla, over Arrow Creek, and probably a whole lot others. They're all well known for work. The Rio Grande Return, who would be the contractor who wants to do this, they're expert in it. They've been doing projects in Caldera and these other streams, and it will benefit both fish and terrestrial wildlife. I suspect if they implemented this and some riparian meadows started recovering, you probably find New Mexico meadow jumping grounds. And we get some additional benefit for endangered species. It's downstream of the streams that run off of the 10 federal parks, which are refuges for Rio Grande cutthroat. So you can see that there will be restoration of Rio Grande cutthroat there after the project will be completed. And so the only weakness is something that we talked about last time, and that could be changed, is just having elk fencing, having the cattle fencing for the exclosures replaced by elk fencing, because the willows and alders that they're going to be planting and restoring or start growing up, the elk will eat them just as readily as the cattle. And they have to get up to 3 or 4 feet high before they can withstand heavy grazing. So try to keep the elk out. And that's what's done. If you go on the Rio San Antonio above the hot springs, it's like a string of pearls. That when I first came to New Mexico, that stretch was a wasteland. It was like a ditch going through a desert. And now where the exclosures are, they're green, they're lush, they're really nice trout who live in them. And I guess the plan over time is once the vegetation gets high enough inside of those, they move them to the places that haven't been done. And over time, you get the whole corridor restored, and it raises the water table. Meadows come in, it's what, and that habitat is the rarest habitat in the state of New Mexico. It's less than 2% of the wildlife habitat is those mountain meadows. And the Bacchus is a great big drainage. It spreads over a large area, and it could be a gem if we could just get it restored.
So after our meeting in July, it seemed like there's consensus with the CDC that elk fencing was recommended. So I did that through leadership and also with Dr. Cirque's partners. So
Now,
that would be, it would no longer be the full strand, it would be.
yeah, and I saw that, but I just wanted it written down.
Yes.
So we don't forget it.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, thanks.
I had a really hard time with this because I think it's a wonderful idea. And as you presented, you can see what we're building here. I wanted to do it, but I also looked at the money and then looked at how many other things we may have to not include in order to do that. So I gave it a 5. And I can't say yes or no to that one for those reasons. Sure.
Well, it's been high on my list for a lot of years. If anybody ever knew what that place looked like 40 years ago, you would just be blown away at what it is now. And I knew that, I'm not a biologist, I'm not anything, I'm just a hunter fisherman that's grown up here. And that place was the most amazing place to grow up in. And the way it is now, I knew it was degraded. But this proposal, I agree, it was very in depth and it was exactly what I thought was wrong. And when it comes to that, the monies that go into this is not just for this year. It's multiple years, so we're not having to do it again. So it's not as much, it may seem like more, but it's not as much as you think for such a big project. It could obviously go years past that, but we would be set up for a couple of years and not have to deal with it again. And it's a big enough place that it needs that extra amount. It's not just a little tiny stream somewhere. But I think I like everything that was proposed in that proposal. The only thing that its weakness in my mind, even though I did it as a one, was the grazing issues with it and the public usage. There's also a lot of ungulate usage in that scenario too. But historically, I don't think the ungulates have been the destroyers of the riparian meadows. As they go out there at night and they go back in the trees in the daytime. They're not there 24/7. The public, it's been pretty heavily hammered by the public. So it's a heavily used area, which is a good use for monies, but the public usage in some certain areas and things like that, I would love for there to be a continuing addressing of that issue and a continuing addressing of the cattle grazing issues, because it's are we doing a Band-Aid, or are we not addressing how to keep it pristine years further, because we have no correlation or collaboration on resting certain areas or anything. We have nothing except for, well, some of the committees are okay with things. Well, what are they okay with? What do they want to do? It's in their interest to make it better, but it's also in their interest to ignore it, and if they choose to ignore it, then we got a lot of money in projects that can't be maintained, for the long term, because this is a long-term project. And that's pretty much my thoughts on this project.
So this is the type of project I'm a huge advocate for, the methodology, the need for it, absolutely. is there. And so my ranking at an 8, again, just comes from the fact that we have to we have to rank them somewhere in there. And so within this, within the presentation, it showed this as one piece of the Rio Chama watershed restoration. So work going on several other places. I didn't get how this one fits in. And so, and that point there about, the Band-Aid versus a full repair. I mean, I think that's something I'm not sure how this particular project in concert with the others that are being done, to what extent those are being completed. That would elevate it for me as well. So it's got native fish in it. So Rio Grande chub and sucker are in there, potential for, better habitat. And I mean, if it was a candidate for, Rio Grande cutthroat trout, that would also elevate my enthusiasm for it. But no, I think it's great. But so that's what
I like the scale of it. I like that it's riparian. Like you said, that's a very unique resource in New Mexico. Multi-species, of course, if it's riparian, it's watershed. It projects climate resilience if you stick with it, if you don't do the Band-Aid, I was unsure about the price tag, and is that all has to come out of right now, or like they said, can it be phased in, and can part of that with a commitment that, say if it's $600,000, is it possible to make a commitment that we would have another 600,000 next year and already prioritize it for next year? And I don't know, because that really that's about 40% of the budget. But to me, it rises to the top of the kind of projects that I would like to see in the state.
And so I would say, so this year's budget, we have 3 million. Next year, we'll probably only have 2. And so with the 50% split and stuff, I mean, if you consider $1 million, but anyways, like, so the reason why we asked for the 1.2 million this year was because the budget was so big, and because we didn't want to come every single year, same project. Now we base 2 million, basically, and have it compete and everything else. We thought it would be a good opportunity.
So that it has to recompete. You can't.
Yeah,
You can't put it back in and say it competes, but you only need to spend 600,000 this year. Can you do that with a guarantee that you?
One scenario that could happen with any of these projects is, so right on the cusp, like where the funding runs out. So this is like, as an example, $100,000 would go to the Middle Colonial Barrier, and then that's where the money would run out. And so if a portion of that project could be accomplished with that $100,000, and they could find funding, in FMD's budget for the rest, or with other partners, they could maybe fund it. So they would still make an effort to spend that $100,000 on that project. That's built into the way that this works now. And that would be the same for any project. So if, as an example, Rio de los Vacas ended up somewhere on the coast, whatever that dollar amount was, would be attempted to be spent on that. If it wasn't possible to do that, then the funding goes to the next project. Yeah, and then we continue that.
I like the project as well. I thought it was well thought out, well using proven concepts. And I also remember that from 50 years ago, and that person might be seeing that. Back to the very next.
How about you, Art?
I ranked it very high. I've got a lot of familiarity working on and on these projects, and also seeing the effects on other streams. And I think they're great. I like the proposal. I thought was incredibly detailed. Really shows that was well thought. It's been well thought out, and looks like a lot of it's ready to go this fall. So I just don't see a whole lot wrong with this project. And it does benefit more than just fish. It does because of the riparian impact. It's going to affect others, other game species and wildlife, besides just what's swimming around, so. I don't really have anything bad to say, other than obviously the cost is high and we've just talked about that, but I still like it.
Thank you.
Mark ranked this as number 6. And he says, good project with lots of opportunity to improve wildlife and fisheries habitat. Would recommend partial funding this year on this project.
Any public comment on Riverdale's office? Okay. Now we can go on to prescribed burns.
Yeah, I like the prescribed burn projects. I think it's really important to get fire back on the landscape, especially after we spent money thinning and prepping areas to get prescribed burns going. In particular, I like the flexibility that we're getting in the prescribed burn proposals now, as opposed to we're gonna burn this block. And then weather conditions are not good, or something happens and they don't end up burning it, so I like that there's flexibility to go there and those windows are opening.
I rated this 4th. This is a general comment. I think that wildfire is the greatest threat presently to wildlife in the state of New Mexico. And the best tool we have to mitigate that risk, thinning and prescribed burns. And so we want to do what we can to address the most immediate threat. It's reduce the risk of wildfires, and they're only going to, because of fire and drought. And we've got a lot of old ponderosas that the torches if they get into ground fire. So that's a general comment. So these prescribed burns address that threat. I like that it's a partnership with Forest Service. I don't know the details of the regulations, but this proposal says it's for the actual burning, not for it goes only for the burning part. I thought that was a strength. And I also like the 600 acres, actually, the big area. And so we need to address the big areas. When we get ground fires, a 1,000-acre parcel isn't going to make it. Miles. Need all of our forests to be fireproof, and this is a good approach. And I don't see any weaknesses.
It's number 1 for me. All of the same as advantages. We're going to have fires. We need to try to manage and reduce the amount of damage that's done to wildlife, to water, even for our ranches. It's bad for everybody. I do think it's our worst risk at this point. I think they've been doing it consistently over periods when people know how to do it now. And if they just have the resources, then maybe we'll have fewer burn areas that are just thousands and thousands of acres, which we've already got.
I agree with it. I mean, I put it at 5. Partially just that's because that's where it ended up in my thought process, but yeah, we've done so much thinning and things to that nature, and it's the next step in it. And it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's just a small part of what the burns would actually cost. There's other funding, so it's we're helping somewhat, and it being able to be adjusted to anywhere it needs to be. That's important too, because different area patterns. So yeah, we get it back in there. Just it was bigger scale of what it even is at this point, but like the biggest.
great points made, important, do this work. I came out putting it at 7, just again with the ranking, having to do that, but no, I mean, I think there should be a state budget item for doing prescribed burns rather than having it come out of the Habitat Center.
For most of the reasons, I agree, and I think it's the best bang for the buck. It's a small amount of money, but it shows that the Department of Game and Fish is involved with other partners. And it's gonna be millions of dollars to do all of these burns, but the fact that we are contributing and that we're on the same page with these people means a lot to the public. It means a lot to me as a former game and fish employee. I mean, we're in there, we have a dog in the fight. And I think that's probably the most important, but also that it's large scale, multi-species, addresses wildfire. And it puts us in a partnership.
I guess I'm gonna be the bad.
Hey.
Yeah. Don't worry, I'm a firm. It's bad. Hands, and I just don't have any confidence in proceeding as we have in the past. I think there needs to be some major changes in how we do these burns and how we respond to initial attack when we do have an escape fire. So until that time, this just can't support it. So
How about you, Art?
Well, obviously I had it ranked fairly low. It's just, not that it doesn't need to be done. I think I just have maybe whether this should be a habitat stamp priority, or whether the money should be coming out of fire management budgets, more of it. Obviously, a bunch of it is. It's just only a portion of it, but as some other folks said, you have to put projects somewhere when you're. And I just felt this wasn't as high a need for habitat stamp monies as some of the other ones.
Mark ranked this as number 1 in his list. He says prescribed fire is one of our best tools to improve wildlife habitat. Numerous funding sources exist for wildland urban interface. Habitat stamp funds can best be used to fund prescribed burns in remote areas. We are way behind the power curve with habitat management on fire-dependent ecosystems. High rate of return for dollars invested.
Any public comment on prescribed burns? Okay, we can go on to Middle Colonial Berry. Yeah, I thought the two barriers were important. I ranked one higher because it seemed to be more urgent. So that the reach was worse. And so, but I just compared to the other projects and the amount of money that they were costing and my perception of what the budget was at the time, I just ranked it.
Okay, these comments actually apply to both barriers because I ranked O'Neill 6 and Alito 7 in my ranking. I think the barriers are important and particularly important to the restoration plans for Rio Grande Cutthroat. But these are actions for a hypothesized future storm event that's going to breach the barriers. Right now, they're effective for as they are built, as far as I've read. So when I compare threats in my own mind to habitat versus wildfires, which are happening all the time now, and the only way we know to mitigate them is through thinning or doing controlled burns. So I rank them lower. I think they're both important, but I think they could done in, future year, next year, the year after. If one of them is breached, Game and Fish knows how to address it. He did it for one of them already. And, so it's in my own mind, evaluating relative risk. And I just put both prescribed burns higher, and that bumped for me the El Rito and the middle Pamil lower. Of the two, I ranked Pamil higher because it targets a new location for the Canadian strain of beer Grand Cut Trail, and a lot of the preliminary work has already been done. And for the El Rito, which in the next, it's an engineering design, which is okay, and it's a stream that where anglers can target beer. That's what it's higher visibility. So I gave you my comments for both of them.
I'm gonna do essentially the same thing. It's essentially the same numbers I've been looking at. And as I'm looking at the things that I ranked higher, it feels to me like that's gonna take, if we all did that, that's gonna take our money. If we have extra money, it needs to be the next one. Yeah, what I would think. More than anything below them at this point. And they're valuable, they're important for fishing, they're important for the fish. So they're a yes, but I don't know if there's anything.
I put it at number 6, for Middle Colonial, mostly because it doesn't have an engineered type. Barrier. Couldn't think of the word. So, you know, it is probably a really good area to continue with. Put something in there that actually is good to go from the beginning, because I don't know really when that was put in, but a culvert with some stone on it is not a fish barrier to protect that scenario, or to start something new with the Canadian strain, like you were saying. So I thought it was a decent project.
This was, high priority for me. I ranked it number 3. I, understand the urgency of doing it. A lot of work went into moving this population, this rare population, into that spot, and they need to design and complete an effective barrier in a year. That's so that's why it was a high priority for me.
Well, I guess I'm on the other end of the spectrum, but I come with a little different paradigm on this. It's not a habitat project in my mind. It is a project, it's not addressing fixing habitat or improving habitat. It is a fisheries management project. In my opinion, the money should come out of federal aid. It should come out of the regular Department of Federal Aid budget, and I know that there's ways to manipulate money because we've done it before. But it's not a habitat project. It's a fisheries management project. And same with both of those and the solar bee. They're fisheries management. The solar bee is closer to being a habitat project because it affects habitat. But the habitat is obviously really good. Otherwise, the Rio Grande cutthroat wouldn't be doing well, okay? And we don't have all the issues that we have with Las Vacas or with burning or that. So I'm pretty solid on, I think the game department needs to look at. I've seen too many times in the past when an agency comes short of funds for things and they look for their other agency or even the legislature. They look over here and go, oh, there's a little bit of money we could pull that over here and we'll do it here. Well, I don't think that money should be spent on barriers. So, okay. and don't get me wrong, I'm a fisheries biologist. I've worked with Rio Grande cutthroat, I've worked with Gila trout, I've worked with Apache trout. Barriers are one of the most important things you can do in securing a population. But I just don't think this is the place for that kind of funding.
I guess I'll speak to all of us. Well, I needed them both as well. Primarily, because they have to go some. And, but, I don't see it surviving a 100-year storm. event. So I think this is probably a short-term fix and not necessarily use.
Art?
Well, obviously, again, I ranked this high primarily because of the strain of cutthroats that are in there. There are very few streams that have that Canadian strain, so I think we need to do what we can do to secure that a strain of fish. We don't want to have to, you know, reduce them to being a hatchery strain. You know, it's a significant amount of money, maybe at a minimum, fund the design this year, but I'd like to see it done. I just think it's important to protect that strain of fish, and that streams means a lot to me. I caught my first cutthroat up there, so been stood on that current barrier many times, and had a lot of questions about it. So yeah, I'd like to. That's why I've got it high.
I'll read Mark's two barriers together, maybe. Their Middle Conneaut is number 7 for Mark, and Alrito's number 8. He says, good project, but very focused on one species of fish. Does a fish barrier really cost $800,000? And then Alrito, his comment is, I would rather see other funding sources used for planning, assessment, and target habitat stamp funds to implement on the ground projects.
And Jimmy, did you want to add anything on that already to the barrier system?
No, that's really the only reason I ranked it a little bit higher. It was just maybe that point in there.
You know, I'd like to have clarification exactly of this point of it being management. It should be management funded, not HSP funded. Is that the way it is, or I mean, because there's for habitat stamps, I get it. The funding from habitat stamp is to, you know, help habitat of thing. At that point, I guess I'm not quite sure where that is, you know, because I obviously don't want to fund things if it's not, you know.
It's proactive in a way that it secures a habitat for those fish, but what are all the other things that can occur in there that it's not addressing? All it is keeping non-natives from moving and integrating and reducing the gene pool on those. And I don't know, I'm a little familiar with the Conneaut, haven't been to the El Rito, but it just doesn't seem to me like that's for $800,000 when you have $2 million, but that's where that money needs to go. When you have all these other things happening statewide, like the burns, like the either Rio de Las Vacas, the connectivity, those are a lot better bang for your habitat money, and it really is a management deal. Somebody in fisheries needs to go look and see what's going on. Reprioritize the budget, like maybe you spent all the F money, you know, for fisheries. Well, we need to look ahead on that.
Yeah, because who funded the movement of all those fish? I mean, because that was
absolutely,
I think.
absolutely. You have a Forest
So where'd
Service
that
involved
funding
in that, and those fish were brought for refugia. You know, I mean, there's.
You have to treat it and all that.
They should have known that they were gonna need more funding.
Well, so in my position, I wouldn't be capable of talking about fisheries.
I know, but I'm just-
If you guys want, we could bring Mike in and he could answer questions if you guys want.
Later, maybe, yeah,
Yeah,
but
if that's important.
Well, it's interesting, because the concept, could definitely alter my thought process on it.
Yeah. And I think, protecting a population of Rio Grande cutthroat trout, that's part of, I see that as being part of, that's an important thing to do.
it is an important thing to do, and I have no problem with that, but I think that there should be money elsewhere to do that. but Maybe there's not.
Why was that population at risk originally?
Because of
wildfire,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So what was the greater risk of wildfire or ground trout?
It's a very complicated.
Do we have any public comment on the barriers of either melatonin or oil? What?
I spent 7 years working on Middle Colonial on fishery habitat. There was no barrier up there. We hauled and built structures in that stream, which built pools for trout to live in. And that's where you talk about habitat improvement. It started in 1982 before it was open to the public, so just to give you some idea.
Anything else? Other barriers?
Were you gonna do any more specific discussion of the El Rito one?
Well, everyone was kind of giving comments on both, but yeah,
Oh.
now's a great time.
I'll just add one comment, because that was 80K for the design, right?
Yeah.
And that other funds were leveraged for the implementation. Mike said that during the presentation so the design and 80K, much that, 10% of what the Middle Colonial one is. So it's, again, small scale. The funding, the design, and then the other funds leveraged in to build it, so.
Anything else on the barriers? We could talk about the solar B, which also there was a lot of different opinions on that. So,
Yeah, I just had some questions about how it fit in terms, because we're buying a piece of equipment that was gonna need to be serviced. And I know it helps with fish habitat is in the lakes, but I just had a question whether that was really good use of limited funds. That's fixed. Okay, down at this level, for me, I saw all of these as, in my own evaluation, relatively low priority, so it's just a question of which one, flipping a coin or whatever. So for the solar B, what I thought was the main benefit is the company would do the work. They would install it and maintain it. It was their equipment, wouldn't require much, if any, game and fish staff involvement, maybe just contract monitoring, but nothing more. So it's kind of like plug it in. So I thought that was a benefit. And the other was that the funding would be, habitat stamp funding would be pretty visible to the public. I mean, it'd be pretty obvious if once that was implemented, that the tiger muskie fishing would improve. And so I thought that was a benefit. The other is I looked up solar bees online and we read a lot of evaluations, and for this particular use, they've been successful. They haven't been uniformly successful for the application for a reduction of algae growth. So that was, when I read that, there was kind of mixed, but for this particular use, they seem to be beneficial. The weakness is it benefits, and the only anglers it really benefits are tiger muskie, people who are targeting those. That's relatively
Lake Roberts too. We have Lake Roberts as well.
It's bass and trout and bluegill and catfish,
Right.
all fish.
Okay, so I'm taking it off.
And Kamado has rainbow trout too, so.
Okay, all right, so anyways. Yeah, the other thing I would recommend is if if this is implemented, need some really nice signage. It says, your habitat stamp money are being put to use for benefit of the public. So anyways. That's it.
And the way I understood the presentation, I may be wrong, so you can. We'll see. But there are two old machines that are going to be taken off to be repaired. And there are 4 new machines that are going to come in. So ultimately, we're talking about 6 machines. And we're paying for all of them. I don't know, I
don't think it was budgeted for the repair on the 2 that are existing, right? I just got the 4 units at 75K and then the install of 20K.
Yeah, we don't even know what the
Yeah.
cost is to repair them because
It may not
we have to
be,
pay them to
Yeah.
get it repaired.
From what I recall, and we could ask, but from what I recall, the 2 that they're pulling out, they're gonna be assessed on whether or not they can be repaired. They're not-
yeah, it's,
So they might-
I don't think we have the ability, just
So-
because they belong to Forest Service.
Correct, Forest Service has to repair those.
So it still seems to me like we're dealing with 6 and maybe we don't need to deal with that many. And if the Forest Service can repair, then they've got backup for when the 2 new ones there. So I'm looking at the model, I get lots of these things and it sounds expensive. I remember years ago when we knew what that machine was. And the lakes, obviously they're good, but too much to spend. What it is, I'm not sure.
I was actually shocked at the cost factors and the way that you're tied into the company of having to pay to get it even looked at, you know, and things. I mean, it just seems like they're just sticking it to us. You know, and then on the other side of it, I understand that it could help with oxidation and stuff like that. But I also remember visiting Kamado Lake many times when I was a kid and catching fish all day long, you know, nice trout, big, I mean, what's been the difference from then to now? And I know we used to catch bass at Lake Roberts too, long time ago. I mean, it's just I'd like to see a more, bang out of it, you know, than it just sitting there float. I canoed by it over there in Kamado Lake, and I'm like, at that point, I'm like going, That's all I could think of, and fished all day and didn't catch them. And I just remembered back when I used to catch fish there. There was no way I could go to Kamado Lake and not catch fish.
that's lakes and reservoirs and time, right? That
Maybe.
natural part, but
Yeah, so anyway, that was why they're at the bottom.
I had put it at 4 because it's a direct benefit for anglers habitat stamp funds that they pay for. And like everyone said, people always, you know, it's like, what is that? What is that? You know, is that a de-icer? Is it, you know, so it's a great opportunity for public education, public interest, you know, as was said, you know, you can have a naming contest for it, you know, have kids suggest names for the units out there. I mean, so.
I think it's great as far as the fact that there's very few places to fish in that part of the state, and it helps support fishery, but you know, the issue is in the linology of the lakes, that it has not rained for 22 years. You need flow through. You have a nutrient loading going on in the lakes. That's what causes the algae. The algae dying is what causes the lack of oxygen in the lake. So you're putting a Band-Aid on to hold this, and yeah, you're holding it up, but for how long? Reservoirs, man-made reservoirs always age, and the drier it is, the faster they age, and especially when you have grazing of all ungulates, especially cattle in the watershed, you're constantly putting more nutrients into those lakes. and nothing's going over the spillway. And you really need to have that exchange of water. And that's why the fishing used to be good. I was a game warden there 35 years ago. The fishing was excellent, okay? And, but it also rained like hell. It rained like hell and the water went over the spillway right here. Okay, so we flushed out those nutrients. And we don't, so we're addressing a climate issue with me. I'm not against putting the money for those things. I do have some issues with how with buying this product that we really may not have a lot of control over. But it's good. It's a good advertisement. So I mean, I can't say no, we don't do it, but it just falls way below everything else. So,
Well, I felt it met the spirit of the Habitat Check program. I rated it #1 simply because of the ease, purchase and install. I was a little bit concerned with the price tag was a bit high, but I was impressed with the longevity of the existing units. 10, 15 years. I think it's an easy return, a quick fix. It's easy to do.
How about you, Art?
Well, obviously, I put it at the bottom, no particular reason, and I just felt some of the other ones were a little higher priority. I think there's a possibility here that maybe giving them some funding for one of the lakes and not both of them this year is a way to help it out. But yeah, I just maybe it's because I don't live down south and fish those lakes that I don't really have a whole lot of experience with them, and don't don't have a lot of enthusiasm for them.
Mark ranked the Solar Bee purchase as #3, and he says both Lake Roberts and Camado Lake are wonderful resources for fishing opportunity in southwest New Mexico. Since solar bees have been shown to be successful in reducing fish die-offs, this project should be ranked as a high priority for providing quality fishing opportunities.
Any public comment on the solar bee purchase? Okay. Jimmy, we can move on to the Snow Lake dredge evaluation.
Yeah, I think the project needs to be done. But it just ranked lower compared to other things. So once I got this far down the list, a lot of these are about the same as far as that.
Yeah.
This is just for an evaluation for a project that's going to be really, really expensive, for which no funding has been identified. So I didn't think it had a very high priority now, because you're not going to get funding. Real good is the evaluation. So basically that from a strength standpoint, it would be great as a possible recreation fishery for Gila trout. That was mentioned. I thought that would be a plus, but I would like to see some indication that the funding for actually doing the dredging might be available before doing the study.
This was my lowest one. Just because I'm not seeing a plan to keep it from throwing. It's starting to fill relatively quickly and more quickly over time. If we're going to have tremendous rain, maybe just dredging it once would do it. Otherwise, I think it becomes a dredging business, which I'm not sure is, I'm not going to just like with the fish and not my area of expertise.
Yeah, I also ranked it at the bottom. And a part of it was, like was mentioned, the funding of it wasn't secured or even conceptual. And that didn't really work for me. But I also think on that situation, the first step that needs to happen is, like it was alluded to at the other meeting, the watershed area towards that needs to be secured first because of all of the fires it had. There's a lot of issues to get secured first because like in 2013, when after the fires and floods and, you know, that was a pretty detrimental thing to that lake, you know, and somehow we need to secure that first. So I would welcome projects dealing with that first.
I had ranked it at number 6, but because it is a very popular place for people to fish and it's degraded over the years tremendously. But yeah, I would much rather see, you know, all the multi-millions necessary to actually do the work, you know, lined up before financing.
I put it in the middle. One thing about not having the money later to do the dredging is you don't know how much you need, and this will tell you what you need and whether it's even possible or feasible. And if it's that important in that area, and it is feasible, it's something that could be taken to the legislature to look for additional funding, or through Forest Service money or federal money. But at the same time, it's another man-made lake. And unfortunately, that's what we have in the Southwest in an erosional geography here. We're gonna get sedimentation. It's gonna happen. I did talk to some Forest Service people and they are doing some work on the upper watershed. And which is good. They're looking forward on that. But it's just iffy. It's cheap. It's cheap to find out a question that actually has been asked for quite some time. Should we dredge the lake? And maybe it might once and for all settle. We can afford it or we cannot afford it. And I also talked to Eric Fry a little bit. And the dredging, we think about dredging with these big machines. It's actually a hydro dredge where they put it on a barge and they go in there, and the fish that are in there are all, they'll have to come back with new fish, but it actually stirs up the bottom and then they suck that out and out of the lake. So it's not it's a floating dredge. It's not a big machine like we did.
This is a slurry.
It makes a slurry.
So where do they put it? I mean, they
That's-
can't put it in a dump truck.
And
haul it
they
out.
have to find a place, and that's the other big issue, is finding where to put it. And that's part of the evaluation, is where do we put it? What's the trucking cost? To me, it sounds like we'll be evaluated, and what I researched a little bit, dredging for some lakes at Bermejo, the price is astronomical. And I think they'll, once and for all, it might say, we'll put this to rest. No, we're not gonna dredge it unless you want to have half the game department budget to pay for it, you know? So,
But you wouldn't truck a slurry. You'd have to de-water it before you truck it.
that's all part of their evaluation. They'd have to address all of that. Okay, yeah, it's not a matter of what they're gonna, how they're gonna dredge it. It's a matter of lining up all the pieces. This is what we do. These are the problems. This is what it costs. Yeah. Yeah, but anyway. It's not real important.
I rated it somewhat higher at number 4. Just because I thought it was a token amount to determine, to complete that assessment and determine the path forward. It's gonna answer a lot of these questions for us.
The strongest point.
Yeah, about the 50,000 is cheap. And again, it needs to be done. It's first step.
How about you, Art?
Obviously, I didn't have it real high, but I think, you know, one advantage of it is since it is a design issue and not a construct thing, the price is pretty good. We might be able to fit it in as we work down the prioritization list, and if there's a little bit of money left that can't fund another project that's ranked above it, that this may be something to stick in there. I like the idea of having having the design, on the shelf and pocket that we can pull out and as other people have stated, you've got it there, you can start looking at what you need to do and what the cost would be and where the other funding would come from, et cetera. So having designs on the shelves are nice, but it's just not a real high priority for me.
Mark ranked the Snow Lake Dredge as number 9. He says, while I do believe that dredging Snow Lake is a good idea, I personally think that Habitat STIP funds should be used for on-the-ground projects and not planning efforts. Other funding sources for this initial plan should be explored to gain the initial information and revise this project for next year to actually fund project work in conjunction with other funding sources.
Any public comment on Snow Lake Dredge evaluation? Okay, so we've got 2 left. I'm noticing they're very similar projects and you all rank them similarly. So if we want, we could talk about both of them at the same time as we go through.
Yeah, I mean, I like these 2 projects. I thought some good aspects of them were that it was relatively straightforward, right? There was a problem with overutilization of these areas. That would solve that problem. They were relatively low cost. I like the fact that they're an important resource in this area, not necessarily because it's like a large riparian corridor or anything, but it's kind of an isolated wet spot, semi area, right, as compared to some of the more higher elevation Montana riparian systems. But they just didn't rank out high, so they kind of ranked it below.
These are, as you said, they're like oases in the middle of a semi-desert, and they've been really degraded over the years. I would say primarily by overgrazing by cattle. In an environment like that, if there's water, that's where the cattle are camping out. And I wonder how the grazing permittees were allowed to let their cattle stay there. I mean, to say that these fences aren't wildlife proof, barbed wire fences contain cattle everywhere. And I'm wondering how they cut, do they fall down and the permittees don't maintain them? A lot of in northern New Mexico, the permittees say, well, a tree fell on the fence and knocked it down. There are no trees that knock the fences down there. So, and the photos look like nobody's paid attention to them for decades. Not that it just degraded recently. So that's a huge issue to me. Why were they allowed to go into that state for so long without any responsibility on the permittees or anybody doing anything about it? And if they did need fencing, why not just barbed wire? It's a pipe and cable. Well, I think they're a lot more expensive than barbed wire, and maybe they last longer. Although I suspect you see some angle cutters being used on the cables. If that's the only water sources around. So that's my philosophical approach to these things. But for particulars on the Soda Springs, they say they're gonna reseed and plant native plants. Without some serious plant, I don't think native grasses or any kind of potted seedlings are going to survive. You look at those photos, you're not going to. The seed will never germinate, and potted plants are going to die in the first season. You can see areas where that's been done with people working really hard for it, and plants. They need some boosting for the first couple of years to get their roots down deep enough to survive. And so I think that's just window dressing. That's not going to happen outside the immediate riparian area. And And there was a phrase in that proposal that subsequent invasive plant control and downcut mitigation are potential continuing Portco BLM management. They're not committed to do it, they say they might do it, so that really causes that one to rank lower for me. On the Savoy Canyon, since we're doing both of them, the documentation and the need is better. One of the photos shows an existing pipe and wire fence, illustrating grazing outside versus in, and if that's on this area, it sounds like it's already been done, or was this just picked up from somewhere else as an example? So that was a question for me. But I put them, those are my two lowest. So that's why.
I don't have anything really strong to say about this. This is very high, it's like 8 and 9, more than a couple of other things, but water is important for everybody, but this seems simplistic for some reasons. Somebody's got to maintain these things, and it's got to be a full package. It's an full package, and we're not going to get growth. Whatever we put up can be broken if nobody's watching it. Now I know that a lot of the alpine, particularly in the Signal Canyon area, they really do need places that they can get water. I'm just not sure that this is manageable. So I did not get the word.
There were 7 and 8 for me, mostly just because that's where they, as I went through the rankings, that's where they ended up. But yeah, I have a lot of issues with some of the stuff, you know, like Silver Springs, obviously, like what has been mentioned already, you know. I think for those types of areas, you know, it's a great big area that's fenced in. I think we need to really take a look more at not only fencing riparian areas in, but what's the upland areas of those riparian areas are just as important as the riparian areas that are being addressed. That's a big piece of what that you know, it's a you know, the way that it was put, that we, you know, it's imperative that we keep that thing fenced out, cattle out of there to protect the 11,000 acres that's already been improved, the forest stuff. And then they show a picture of a fence down the road somewhere that has grazing and not grazing. Well, just because we fence that water doesn't mean a cattle's not gonna still be there. It's not gonna just make them disappear, just like that other riparian area that had the fence. The cattle was heavily grazed on one side and it wasn't on the other side. It's gonna be the same exact thing, or it would seem that it would be. So it's not the way that it was worded to get us to emotionally be charged for this project wasn't there. You know, it's like, no, I don't want to be like put in the position of, oh, we need to fence the cattle out right here because we need to protect this 11,000 acres. You know, that's not the case. The cattle are still there. They're gonna find the water, that whole drainage area. There's windmills, like they've said, there are places, those cattle are going all over the place anyway, you know, so I don't want to be. It just, the premise, the way it was worded was really not okay with it. And that's why they were down where they were.
Yeah, I don't have any new points to add.
I hate to use this word, but it's a Band-Aid for neglect. And, with the pictures of the fences and stuff, no one's touched those for years and years and years, and why it suddenly is it important? And yeah, a pipe fence would be more, would last longer before somebody did something. It'd be easier. If somebody cut a piece, they can maintain that versus a bunch of stuff falling down. But, and again, I'm not totally familiar with it, but the real Puerto management area is probably one of the most impacted areas in the state, of anywhere in the state. And I'm not sure how to address the impacts because they're so huge. And the habitat for elk and deer is marginal there, in my opinion, okay? So what kind of bang are we getting for the buck there? I don't think, and I think a barbed wire fence would probably take care of it. If they didn't wait 30 years to repair it, or 40 years. I mean, some of that fencing looked like it was put in there with a Model T, you know? It was terrible. And the incising of the channels and all that, if they're not gonna address that, then why worry about that? Thanks.
I guess for my part, is that, good assessment of damage to the area, is something that's, I'm not convinced this is a solution, but, I rather than bottom lower half, simply because anytime they're talking about, fencing out cattle, I think it should be responsibility. There's some responsibility for that, if not all.
Art?
Well, I agree that water's important, but I didn't see a whole lot of real benefit from a habitat standpoint, other than maybe protecting the water source itself. The habitat looked pretty marginal. Soda Springs a little bit higher because it was they were ready to implement. Other than that, yeah, just I think most of the comments we've heard before apply. Not too exciting.
Thank you.
Mark had these as his 10 and 11, with Sequoia Canyon 10, Soda Springs 11. Sequoia Canyon, he says, nothing wrong with the project idea, but I feel like habitat stamp funds have funded too many exposures in the past. I don't think sportsmen should have to put the entire bill for fencing areas where grazing management issues are the root cause. Revise the project for fiscal year 26 with more detail on how livestock grazing could be modified to improve the situation. Basically designing the project with a more collaborative focus. And then for Soda Springs, he says, as with 10, there's nothing wrong with the project idea, but habitat stamp funds have funded too many exposures in the past. I don't think sportsmen should have to foot the entire bill. Much the same. Revise the project with more detail on how livestock grazing could be modified to improve the situation.
And do we have any public comment on either Soda Springs or Sequoia Canyon?
Can you bring us a veggie tray? Maybe a nice fruit flower.
Sequoia Canyon, about 20 years ago.
You know, like.
I got a notice on that thing, it says it's a silk trap that turned into a dirt tank. And it talked to the guy at Bill Zia, who basically worked out there and got it started.
I fixed the links for
Canyon part of it.
I have them.
We're gonna take care of 11,000 acres of habitat. You need some wildlife waters out there instead of a dirt tank. And a fence is not gonna hold up, barbed wire fence, not without permittees. And the cable fence and pipe fence are being used on all the new wildlife waters around the state. The pictures in the documentation, that is around Savoia Springs, which is a wet meadow now because it was cable fenced, cable and pipe fence around it. And it's continuing to seep down the canyon. And it's a great area. You want to pick up sheds. Go out there in that wet meadow in spring, all right?
I got a question, Bob. So you've got that area, because we don't know much about what that was, so it's working, which is good, but you can see on one side of the fence, it's heavily grazed.
Yeah,
What about the downstream or the upstream
Yeah.
areas of the?
you mentioned
watershed?
windmills, and there are 3 or 4 windmills down that I can go in, I've got a whole chapter on this thing, if anyone wants to read about it. This canyon work has been done on it. It was farmed way back in the 30s. It's eroded because they had irrigation dishes out there. And wagon trails, so, it's right below the mountain lines, they may want to go out and take a look at.
What's the condition below and above the spring though, coming out of that fence line? Is it
They have
deteriorated
been
still?
doing structures in the bottom of that canyon for 20 years.
So there's additional
And
ones?
they're raising, they have raised the bottom of that canyon out and smoothed it out where they're getting more habitat going back down in their willows and.
So it is.
Sedges and so forth, yeah,
Okay.
but it could use another 100 years.
Okay. They could all use it.
Who has been funding that work?
Funding work, I don't know the state agency, it's the water folks and habitat folks have done a lot of the funding out there and then basically hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteers.
Okay, this is people working with Bill Seedike,
Yeah, see, like, so one,
and it's BLM, it's on BLM.
it's all BLM. Yeah, it came in when they bought that area out there, when that transferred to the BLM, the Malapai area, whatever they call it. It came in later because that was a piece of private property.
No, it's the canyon.
So that canyon, the canyon is not wilderness,
Okay.
most of it, which makes it able to work and put equipment in there and work. But it's still trapped, folks. It hadn't made hold water probably here.
Like to make one more comment? Oh, go ahead.
It just sounds like that might be potentially a good project, but it needs a much better proposal. Is my opinion. So we know why.
Yeah, Sequoia area there, I'm familiar with it as well, and I would love to see, I like the concept of the project being in there and it being improved for wildlife in there because the area itself, it holds some amazing animals. I mean, it is absolutely, it could be a world-class area, and it is in certain areas over there, like in is it the Zia or Zuni or? But, they do some really good Acoma.
It's the Acoma.
They do some amazing, wildlife habitat, and they're producing world-class animals. I mean, the area has a lot of possibility, so I'd love to see more of that from them. I don't want them to feel like we're just downing on them.
I just have a general comment. So I agree 100% with all the sentiments about what should be the permittee's responsibilities, right? And they're good public land permittees and their taxes. But I mean, we can lament about the fact that they should have to take care of this thing. They should. Fact is, they don't get forced to. Like, if you violate the terms of your apartment lease, when some of the permittees do, you'd be evicted, right? And so there's some things that we should be okay with doing, and there are other things we shouldn't be okay with doing in terms of fencing when it should be the permittee's responsibility. At least in my, I mean, the bunnies are still grazing in the path. So there's no political spine in the part of our land management agencies to take on public lands. And to make sure that the bad permittees get held to account, and then make their good permittees look bad. So while I think we shouldn't fund some things because it's permittee's responsibility, I'm a little hesitant for some projects just to say, I don't want to fund anything just because it should fund. Even though I agree it should, they're not gonna do it, and it needs to be done sometimes. So in some of those cases, like. spend
So we need a political action committee against permitting.
Just enforce the-
Against the Forest Service and the BLM to enforce their rules.
Yeah, they just need to enforce some rules.
About that, huh?
And their grazing programs need to recognize the problems that are caused by the grazing programs aren't wildlife. And there are a lot of range managers throughout the West that see the issues that wildlife have with grazing as being a wildlife problem. And so they don't even want to pitch in grazing. That's the problem. It's the fact is it's not a problem for the cows.
They don't like them.
You have any other comments on those two projects?
Not for me.
Oh, go ahead, Art.
No, not for me. I don't have any more comments.
Would like
I
to
get-
right now, just kind of take a 10-minute break, to help us get through the next part of this. We brought some light snacks for you guys. Get a chance to use the bathroom, get some water, whatever you guys need. So yeah, maybe we'll come back around 10 after, maybe 11, 10 or so. Sounds good.
Get ready.
So for this next bid here, again, just to remind everyone, the whole point is for you all to come up with a final rank for each of these projects. So there's lots of different ways you can go about it. If you need it visually from me, like if you want to update scores over here to try to visualize stuff, if you want me to move stuff around. If any of you wants to propose a rank for a project and float the idea out there, it's kind of your show from here. I'll do what I can to try to read the room and help facilitate. But it's your show.
I would like to start.
Sure. Go ahead.
I would like to see Rio de Los Vacos at least move up a spot. That's not enough to get started, and.
That's what's left after they fund that.
Yeah, that's what.
So it would get funded.
Yeah.
Funded, yeah.
Okay, well then I'm actually pretty good with the whole thing. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
I
have a question. Given the cost of Middle Colonial. What's $100,000 you can do for that? Is that even?
Well, so it does so there's a couple of things that go on with whatever project is right on the cost. So the first thing, if any project above it comes in under budget, those remaining funds go to that one first. They would drop to that. The other thing is if any of the projects above it don't happen for any reason, that's the next project that gets the funds. Now for 100,000 that goes towards that barrier itself, I don't think I'm equipped to answer what that would do. I know that that's helpful. But someone from FMD would have to speak to whether or not that would be something they could work with. And we could get some and talk about that if we arrive there.
You know, the Rio de los Vacas, when we were talking about it, because, you know, about the full $1.2 million budget versus the possibility of funding phase one. What about that? You know, with that give us $600,000 more, you know, to, if you funded it at phase one, you know, half the level. And then about the Middle Colonial barrier, I was wondering in that, because a match, you know, so that's 800K, you know, I mean, you know, a 50% match as a contingency to going forward would seem like, you know, that'd be that might make it more appealing for some of the others. And then you know, just the El Rito barrier, that was a smaller budget for that. And so, you know, I mean, possibly I could switch the barrier assessment for the El Rito if it would ensure it got funded.
And so one of the things, so with Rio de los Vacas, if we were to go down the road, and I think there's precedents for this, like from past meetings where things get line item from some of these proposals. So yeah, if, for example, phase two, there's a line item. Then basically you all would just probably expect to see phase two presented next year, and it would compete again and see how it did with those.
You would have some backing in it, and it would be a continuation.
Yeah.
Of already funded, so
Yeah.
it would have a little more push.
And the way it was done, because you have the BDAs, 700K, you have fencing, 250K, and then plantings, 250K. So the plantings clearly would be later. I mean, I don't know. I mean, BDAs first versus fencing.
They do the BDAs, then they do the plantings, and then they build the exposures around the plantings.
Yeah, you know what
happens? Do they build the fence really quick then?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's basically as soon as they're done with the plant, and in some cases, it has their planted.
I don't see it having to be that way, and again, just from my experience on Vermeo, we built the fence first.
Well, so what they're using now, like they're using basically this auger on big machines so they can get really deep.
They've got a mini excavator
Well,
that they can take, it's on tracks, and can go down in there. I was on a project on the Savoia, and a couple of months ago.
Or are you talking about the plantings though?
Yeah.
With the auger?
Yes,
Yeah.
and then
And the
with
So bigger.
And the posts.
and when we grab the turns approach, they put the posts for the fence first, because you can still drive the machine between the posts. So then as like segments of the planting is done inside the enclosure, then the fence is constructed, so.
Let me just throw out something. We put the fence in first, and we still took in a big excavator with a stinger on it. You know, the stinger, big long stinger to push that in. But, and that was often the next year that we planted. And by the time we were in there planting, the willows were already here, the rootstock is already in there. And we were amazed at how much rootstock after being beat for 50 or 80 years was still there. And our planting, except for what was right on the stream, we didn't have to plant anything on the outside of it. I don't know what it's like on the Las Flacas, but this was the upper Vermejo. So,
There's one lower elevation, depends on how long it's been grazed and stomped and whatever. One of the things they have to do within the auger on the mini excavator does, you got to get all the way down to where the water level is.
Exactly.
At the driest part of the year, and if it doesn't, they don't take.
Exactly.
They do.
Yeah.
And what we did on the Savoia, I think some of the stuff that had been done a few weeks before, or maybe months before, it looked like they were already letting out. So the question. Suppose the 1.2 million is allocated. And they spend 600 doing the first year's work. How is that other 600K carried? Is it still on your books? Is it still,
So-
is it contracted to the?
Everything that we're talking about today, the $3 million is part of one budget code. And we have authority for those funds for the next 3 years.
Okay.
So any project prioritized today, if something happens and it can't happen this year, we could still accomplish it with those funds without having to come back here and talk to you all about it over the course of those 3 years. We'd start getting pretty twitchy after that second year because we wouldn't want to get into a situation where we lose the authority and the funds revert back.
Right.
So typically, like, we're fairly comfortable looking at like a 2-year project, like with this way of spending money.
They have,
We're gonna need to-
yeah, management flexibility.
Yes.
To reallocate. I would strongly favor the 1.2 million, just because half of the project is inherited value. And then if you look at where the footprint is, that's a significant stretch of the stream, and I think hoping that the money is available next year, who knows what might happen. I would just like to see it done.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I like to spend up the money, but I'm also concerned about kicking the can down the road on a project that everybody likes. Like, pretty soon we're gonna have 5 projects that we all really like that keep coming back. And we're gonna be really hesitant to stop funding those, even though we get better project. Like Whitewater Creek, are we gonna see that again?
This should be the end.
So that's the end of that.
end. Yeah.
I know we're gonna see lightning, so
Probably for prescribed fire.
Yeah.
I don't think for thinning.
no more thinning?
Yeah.
Okay.
so if you prioritize the connectivity, that's 600,000.
That's also another one, so, where there's
could-
precedent for the CAC to take a majority vote on line item things. So within the wildlife habitat connectivity, there's 3 projects that are in there. You know, the CAC could vote and remove 1 or 2 of those. If
Thinking about it.
Okay, I have a question about that one. The proposal said that the Macho project got $1 million from the climate change restoration infrastructure bill. Has that already been done? Is it, are they still working on that money? Because
See if Danica's still here, and she's here.
Oh.
She's left. I wouldn't know, but I know that was happening in tandem with all of our things up there.
so
I don't know if they're gonna.
the habitat stamp money would seem to be a small fraction of that. It might not even be necessary if they're still working on their way through $1 million.
Well, there's a lot, so there's a whole lot of things.
Yeah, that area of the state was almost all exclusively sheep. If you drive around down there, any place that has an old fence, it's a sheep fence.
Okay, they have the infrastructure to work on $1 million worth of work in a single year.
Well, the way that we've structured our partnership with the BLM on all 3 of these districts for this project, for the fence modifications, is the Department of Game and Fish works with the BLM to develop the scope of work, which matches all their specifications, the places where we're gonna do the work. But then the Department of Game and Fish directly contracts the activity. according to the specifications. So what we're doing with this project is we're adding to the capacity, because they have their own contracts with their own people doing their own conversions. This is very. And so kind of like Kathy was talking about, there's partners across the whole state that are engaged in fence modification, fence removal. This is just additive. Okay.
I think I recall Danica telling me that there's still hundreds of miles that's to be done.
In those southern farmer populations, there's probably most of this declining precipitation, not the lack of landscape permeability for them to sway the ground. Yeah. They could be, well, at least in the next 10 miles, it could be a mile over. Yeah, there could be 3.
Exactly.
So on the topic of Rio de los Vacas, there's some discussion about looking at just phase 1 and phase 2. Maybe if we did a straw man here, like if people have reservations, how would we want to do this? Who would be opposed to prioritizing the project at all at the 1.2 million figure? Maybe that's what it's just a straw man.
I wouldn't be opposed, but I would like to know if we want to consider funding it lower, which project are we interested in?
Right, yeah, and so maybe one way we could get to that question, if we, well, what's the group's favorite project? I mean, just looking at this is observational. Whitewater Creek, all 9 CAC numbers had that on the top. That's unique among the fencing was the next closest. It seems like that one almost assuredly is going to end up at or near the top. So does anyone, like, would anyone want to entertain potentially putting that as number 1 to start somewhere? Whitewater? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I could see, I mean, I don't see any issue with the top 5. I mean, if that top 5 is there.
Right.
I mean, what are you gonna do? Move, numbers are almost.
So maybe that's a good way. So the top 5 as it is right here. You know, if anyone has big reservations about these from the projects, because these, as this is, will all be completely full funded. Everything below that would be subject to future funding availability and what happen in these projects. And who here would withhold their vote to prioritize it as they see it right here?
The only 2 we're not seeing are the exposures, right?
That's right. Yeah, those are at the very. Oh, and then the Snow Lake Dredge.
Snow Lake Dredge.
Yeah.
So sounds like it's unanimous.
That's already been
Like that 5.
Well, I would say, like, if you like these 5, one of the things to really consider is that 60. Is what you all would want to have, because odds are, you know, there's probably going to be some funds that become available through some of these projects, maybe costing a little bit less, or maybe one of the projects not happening for some reason.
And I got a thought on that as well, if there ends up being a little bit more funds going to it on top of that what's left there, that could also stimulate maybe, the management part to bring in some more money to it to help get that project done. And now it's a collaborative effort instead of just us doing that. Yeah.
For which one?
For the Middle Colonial.
Fresh in my memory, the Middle Colonial barrier was a full concrete barrier.
Design and complete in 1 year. Right.
Yeah,
That's
and so it's likely to be a big concrete plug with a fall.
the El Rito one is the one that 80K for the design. And then they have the leverage funds for implementation. So I advocate swap, you know, just because if you've got 100K already, that would get that one in the green.
Sure.
And then
Whatever's.
yeah, then for the middle Poniel, at least advance the design or something, you know, right? Because that's, you know, I mean, funds towards going towards the design, if it, you know, that makes sense to me.
Can we split a project like that, that it wasn't proposed that way?
Well, they did propose the design and the build with that, and so the design would be laid out. And so if there's funding available, they could still accomplish the design, as long as they have enough.
So if you switched them, you would get probably El Rito done, and then you would have any funds that came down the road could get the design.
I could punch that in just for
Yeah.
visualization. So this would be 6, and this would be 7. And so if we take. So.
Yeah.
The assessment would be
There's
completely
20K
funded,
left.
and the next project that received anything, that trickles down would be limited.
Then it would follow, it would follow through into the design part.
Yes, yeah, that'd be the first part. That'd have to.
I would be opposed to it.
And what is the estimate of the cost of design?
I
can't
Is
remember.
it?
Usually 100K,
That's
I
what
mean,
I-
ish, that's what they, come out to.
Yeah, I'd like to know the number.
Engineers get too much money, that's what.
Yeah, put that number in there
Well,
so that we're
that-
okay in the number.
Yeah, 100K sounds about right.
So another scenario here, I know. Once we get to the bottom of this, it gets a little trivial, but really these two that are right on the cusp are kind of important because we could easily have. Just a mass exodus of one of our federal partners districts, and we could lose all of our partners and all projects could stop for the whole year. Completely out of our control. So those two projects that are right there are super important. So. Would you want solar be, if funds trickle down, Middle Mill became completely funded, would you want solar be to be the next one up, or is one of these others more appropriate?
The solar bees are still working, right? They just, the one in Lake Roberts, right?
Yeah, that one's still working. There was one, there's one in Kamado that I believe is working, there's one that doesn't, and then there's.
Let's milk those out in a few more years. I don't know, that's what. I'd rather do the for deal.
Yeah, I think if,
It'd get done, right?
yeah, I think if there's a little bit of money left over, maybe giving it to the Peniel for the design part of it anyway, that's about 80K, 85K, something like that. At least that gets that on the books and then gives them a better idea for exactly what they're gonna need to actually build it, maybe in future years. Anyway, that's my thought on that.
And so between Snow Lake Dredge and the Solar Bee, do you have a preference?
I mean, I'd be happy, because 4 solar bees, right? Cut it in half. I mean, if there was enough, if it trickled over and then the Snow Lake Dredge, because that seems reasonable.
Okay, so as it's pictured here is what you'd like.
Yeah, but with the recommendation that the solar bee one be cut from 4 units down to 2. Yeah, I'm just.
Can we do that? Or would we
You
flip
can-
the rank?
Well,
We
you
really
can-
get into like
Well,
That's a good point. Yeah.
proposals, so.
Yeah, I didn't think we were supposed to do that.
Well, if you flipped it. Then they. More than excessive.
Yes.
It's not like-
Yeah, that's true.
And it would just filter down to what it was.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's probably a better way.
So would you want Snow Lake to be ranked 8? and then-
8, yeah.
So that would sort of be. And then for the last two, it's kind of arbitrary at this point, but I mean, would there be, for the groups, do you have one above the other? I mean, you all have very similar ranks for both.
Springs are more important in my opinion. But that's about the only thing that raises it up to like it is right there. Yeah, it'd be in a spring. But it doesn't.
But the Savoy Canyon is gonna support 11,000 acres of prior upland restoration.
At this point, though, that water is hitting 8.5 feet to up to 30 feet or something like that. I mean, that's a lot, that could be a lot of water. It's really, it'll water everything for a while until we can figure out how to enclose it.
So leave it as is, would be your suggestion.
That would be my suggestion.
So, take this in sort of as a group and see what you think about this. So the way it would work, basically these top 6 projects will all be completely funded as of, the end of this meeting. And then any funds that become available from the 6 projects, whether they're not accomplishable or there's just extra money left on the table, would then go on down those extra ones.
And so then we would need to fully fund Middle Colonial before anything trickled down.
That's right.
You'll send this to us, right?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you all are comfortable and you like it.
But when it's done, I don't have to write all this down.
No, yeah, you'll get a copy of all of this. Yeah, if there's no other adjustments that anyone sees that they'd like to have done, we could entertain a vote and see if we. That'd be the fastest privatization after.
I think we accepted this order as presented here.
Yes. Okay, and just go ayes if you're in favor.
Aye.
Nays if you're opposed. You got it.
Wow.
Wow, that's incredible.
Exciting.
It's a huge accomplishment. We're not even at 12 o'clock.
World class Olympic CAC right here.
You guys are good. I did good.
I think it's.
So I'm gonna get this saved. I'll get it sent out to all of you. We have just one other item that was brought up, but before we get to that, I just wanted to let everyone know. We are thinking about a field trip for anyone who'd be interested in seeing Black Mesa, L-Bar, IC Grant, the work we did this past year. And past several years, what we have planned for the future. We'll be looking probably sometime, late September, October, somewhere in there. Or potentially in the spring, when we'll be doing other work. So we'll send out an email to our folks available and interested in that. And then for this other thing, like this kind of came up a little bit in the discussion about the projects. But JP reached out to me and he was interested in kind of talking to the group about the concept of maybe creating a subcommittee to look at the topic of range as a component to some of these problems that we're trying to address with these projects. And so we're just kind of like talking back and forth a little bit, but JP, I'm not sure if you want to just kind of run with it.
I don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
We touched in on this almost all over the place. I was happy the fact that everybody was really, it was an issue that is constantly coming up. And maybe the purpose of this subcommittee might be to just better understand the correlation of range management and HSP projects. And what might become from that subcommittee, maybe we could have a few meetings with some range biologists, wildlife biologists together and, a couple of them. I don't know if that can even happen or not, but informational kind of type deal, because we're intertwined. I mean, in everything. I mean, they're a partner. When you read their mandates and their standards and guidelines and things of that nature, they're mandated to protect this environment. For committees, for everybody that recreates on it, wildlife, and when it comes to partners, Game and Fish is one of the partners. They have a whole list of partners that they work on to maintain this standard of grazing practices. And it's in black and, I've been reading a bunch on it and it's like, it's black and white what they're supposed to do. Like they're not doing what they're supposed to do to a certain extent, but that's not where I think the focus needs to be as much as bridging a communication gap to bring them in, because as a Game and Fish committee, we are partners with them on these issues. You know, whether it be range management, wildlife management, we're partners that need to communicate, you know, and I think we would, you know, I'm not sure, it would be interesting to hear what we might want to, information we want to get out of it. Because it's such a broad thing, you know, so, but basically the purpose of the subcommittee to better understand the correlation of range management and HSP projects. I think just the title alone would generalize it to where we could have conversations about a lot of different things and maybe come back with ideas and of how to communicate better and work together, or just be partners, you know, because we don't have the partners. We're putting a lot of money in projects, you know, like the By the Dow, for instance. Millions of dollars went to that place, not all of our monies, but a lot of our habitat stamp monies. But over the last few years, even before the Hermit Calf fire, I had reports from people that spoke to direct game and fish people up there that said, yeah, I've never seen this many cattle in here. This is after we're doing all these projects in the watershed. Well, the reason why the watershed was degraded in the By the Dow was not the ungulates, it was the cattle. Well, more cattle went in after we did the project. Then the Hermit Calf fire happens, and then the cattle went straight from those areas and they put them into the By the Dow. And it's like, we're doing projects to focus on habitat to benefit all, because that's their mandate, that's our mandate. You know, we want it to hit everybody. But if we're going to just keep on grazing and Jimmy has really hit this almost all the meetings that we've had about you know, we do this project, are they going to rest the cattle for a while? You know, to let this ground reestablish so that we can then go back to all of the activities on the habitat. But if we don't have permittees and range biologists saying, okay, we got to this point, now we're really going to monitor it and watch it, we're not doing what we've done justice, because it's going to get right back to the same thing. We need to see if we can't get cooperation in a better scenario than, yeah, the wildlife biologists talk to a permittee and they're okay with it. But it's not just that. We need more of a cooperation that's saying, yeah, we're gonna not let it get degraded again. So I'd like to know what everybody's thoughts were and what they might want to know, information to get out of a subcommittee. And then at that point, we can see if we can't get 3 or 4 of us that would like to be on that committee and take a dive in it. Maybe 6 months, you know, the February meeting was brought up that we could maybe come back at that point. So that gives plenty of time to look at it. Don't know how it would be received. But my real concern is that it isn't that we don't want to you know, prioritize and fund riparian area projects and things to that nature, because like the 2 that are there, you know, we want to take care of this stuff, but what good is it if we fence the riparian area out and there's been no environmental assessment of the upland or watershed to that spring, you know? And those types of things, you know, maybe if we're coming together, I don't really know what we're gonna come up with, but at least it would give maybe partners that are interested in making the riparian areas and springs and things like that saved, you know, which is their mandate as well. I don't understand where we couldn't have a conversation with them, you know. Maybe it'll help us decide what projects we would prioritize or not. The reason why those 2 didn't get prioritized is a direct reflection of what's going on here. So I'd like to hear what people have to say about this.
I'd like to ask a question. Are there any staff in Game and Fish who would be the equivalent of range specialists like in the BLM or in the National Forest? No. So all of the range expertise that we might interact with the Forest Service or BLM.
Yeah, it all about.
Okay, then I'd like to give my perspective on this from actually knowing permittees personally and knowing what they do and what their opinions are. This is a subset in the Venus Mountain. They regard their permits as a property right. They have really strong relations with the range specialist. The range specialists regard the permittees as their customers. Multiple use is not really part of their thought process unless it doesn't affect their main business, which is raising cattle. And it's basically a political problem because if we propose something that they don't like, they call their representative, state or their government representative. They go right up to the Secretary of Agriculture, and it comes down to the Forest Service, and they get hammered, and that happens over and over again. I'll give you a personal example. Way back when the meadow jumping mouse was just being discovered, there was an area near Lake Fork Canyon where there was a corral that the permittees used to gather their cattle before they took them out at the end of the year. And so they were going to put up pipe and wire corral, upgrade it. And the Forest Service guy who we were dealing with, he said, you know, while we're doing that, we could expand it a little bit and enclose some more, and we could make it a meadow jumping mouse study area. Before and after. Before the grazing permittees heard about that, they complained. That ranger was transferred. Our partner was the Nature Conservancy. They disallowed the whole thing and said they never had any idea that there was any reason to do that. They basically ghosted us, and they were part of the plan to begin with. And so it's really a political issue where the grazing permittees have a whole lot more strength and infrastructure supporting them politically than any of the rest of us.
Yes,
And the people in the agencies, you know, if you were in the Forest Service, you tried to do some of this, and one of our congressional representatives called the Department of Agriculture and called your forest supervisor. What do you think would happen to you?
I can add a little to that, just from personal experience, you know, Vividal, I personally know the main permittee ends Vividal. He hates the game department, he hates that, period. He likes his money, and he wishes it all go away, and we could fence and keep all the people off the Vividal and get rid of all that. So you're not gonna get anywhere with him, okay?
Right.
And no matter what you do. And I found that idea amongst other people, but he is very well connected politically. There's no doubt about it. Was personal friends with Pete Domenici. Pete hunted on his property, that kind of stuff. I mean, these guys are and I think it's a wonderful idea to try to go there and communicate with them. But then it's got to pick your battles, and you got to pick your people. I was once in a meeting, and again, this is 40 years ago, 35 years ago, in a meeting with the Carson National Forest. And the range con for the Carson National Forest we were talking about grazing and elk, and they were, you have too many elk, and we says, no, you have too many cattle, and then we decided that, well, the real problem is the forest has encroached upon most of the grazing areas, so there's less grass available. And the district range conservationist for the Trace Creators District says, I'm gonna personally see to it that the generational pastoral rights of my people will not be infringed upon. And I suggest that you get the elk the hell out of here. And if we do anything for habitat, it will be for cattle. And this is from a Forest Service employee in a public meeting wearing a Forest Service uniform. Okay? And of course, there's the wildlife biologist sitting over here that disagrees with them, but you know, I don't know how to get to that unless you go through a congressional, something, go higher. I think it's great to try to get a rapport with people. But again, and I hate to shoot things in the foot, but as soon as you get a report, that one gets a job somewhere else because they didn't like working where they were at. And it's really tough. So,
Can I say something? I know I'm not part of your.
no, you have a lot of experience with this.
So I'm retired game and fish as well as my current position. The problem with range is that you have the Forest Service, the BLM and State Land Office, and each one has a different policy or regulation that applies to their permittees. So Forest Service does their permittees different than BLM and does differently than state. And so they're all, if you're a permittee, the original allocation is connected to a private land, right?
Right.
So everybody's gonna handle it differently, and everybody has different regs that has to go with that. Everybody has said correct things in that you'll, some of it's political, some people have, different relationship with different range cons. A lot of the problem right now, especially in northern New Mexico, is Forest Service and BLM don't have enough people in their offices right now to do the job that needs to be done. And then when you do have somebody, they're in for a detail, they're there for 120 days and then they're gone. Or the ones that are there a long time are working with landowners for a very long time, but then the administration above them that would give them teeth won't give them right to Jimmy's. So you do have a lot of issues in New Mexico. I'm not familiar with the Southeast or the Southwest because I have worked my entire career in New Orleans. I think it wouldn't be bad for, as a committee, and I don't know how the game department does sites and whether you would look, but yes, you did because you had the forester come in. But it would be, I think as a committee, it would be good for you guys to hear from a BLM range con and a Forest Service range con and a New Mexico state land. Because they all do different things. There's a federal mandate for the Forest Service and the BLM. New Mexico State Land Office is just a different animal. I can't help you there. But yeah, I think it's worthwhile because it's something that you guys definitely have to understand. And everybody comes from it from a different bias. As a hunter, I have a real hard time with state land office. I have less because I think that in its place, livestock is a good, can be a good management tool for some areas. You can thin out, you can deal with grasses, you can deal with noxious weeds, you can deal with different stuff. So I have a kind of a different feeling on it, but I really think you guys need to hear from the guys that do it all the time. Does that make sense?
Just not the one that Lee was talking to.
Sure, yeah, I think, you don't want to talk to them.
I've got some really good range cons in both the Farmington District of BLM and the Taos. Really, folks that really give double damn, you know, and that are trying their damnedest.
You know,
But
yeah.
everybody has to work within those parameters, and that's the problem.
Well, you know, since I've been thinking about this, I've been online and looking at the standards and guidelines and things like that. You know, New Mexico for BLM, the standards and guidelines was approved in 2001, and it had 7 points to it, and 6 were adopted. It's black and white that that riparian area, Soda Springs, should have never got to that degraded state. It's specific in black and white that the upland area of Soda Springs should have been addressed. Lack, the USFS and the BLM's mandates and statements on their websites about grazing is almost mirror imaging, even though it's 2 separate things. So it's saying that vegetation cannot get to a certain point. And at that point, it needs, there's, I don't know what the actual, trigger is that says, okay, we need to deal with it now.
40% stubble, like, you have to take them off.
So at that point, you know, we're getting asked to do a lot of projects, almost every project, not every project, but a lot of our projects are really, it's like, okay, do we turn our focus from being you know, spending our public funds to do things that is the bare minimum standard of what their own guidelines are. Why are we doing their minimum standards? They're dropping below where they are for Soda Springs. I mean, that's a good example of degradation of both upland and riparian area that should have never got to that point. Now they're asking us to do public funds to help it, which is important to us. We want that. We want to help that. But we're getting asked to be, we're not supposed to be the first step in mitigation. We're not there. The HSP is a supplemental funding mechanism for wildlife conservation practices by making it possible to implement on the ground projects that may not be otherwise funded. We're not the first step in mitigation. We're to help the mitigation.
So on our side, you know, for you all, like in the evaluation process, what I think could be productive to come from something like this is maybe a small group tries to tackle what needs to be added to presentations to answer or explain those things. So like maybe a statement from Range on what the issues were and what's been done to mitigate things on their side. Like a subcommittee could come up with those types of recommendations, similar to like the maintenance proposal, like where it's, you know, kind of laid out like what needs to be included with projects. But the other part, so I could completely commit to try to find representatives from Forest Service and BLM to come to the February, March meeting and talk about their range programs. You know, it's like a presentation for the group.
I think it would be good to have those people at the forest level.
Yes.
Supervisor,
Yeah,
not the
that's
district level.
I'd probably go to Region 3 leadership, and then I'd probably talk with Melanie about who the best contact would be from BLM.
Right, we don't want to address the political issue because we can't. That's not what, that's not what I'm talking about. This is what I'm trying to do is, how can we put the funding into this stuff and have a clear conscience?
Well, and maybe you become part of the team, right? If they can't provide, what, Danny's saying about this is what Range has tried to accomplish here, or if it is so degraded that it's like, why come to us for funding when you're not even handling this in office, right?
Right.
And you're just like, okay, we will not fund you until you can show us that you're doing something in office to improve the habitat.
Right.
You're right.
What we don't want though is it to never be brought to us. That's the alternative. Like we did this with maintenance on water stuff, and now we're not seeing any packages like we asked to see, okay, let's do, if we're gonna do maintenance, it's a package, let's do 4 or 5, let's get it specific, it's done, we're not getting that anymore. And they're gonna have, I would appreciate it if they would come to that, but I don't want these projects and these repairing areas just to be gone, because that's one of the reasons why I'm on this committee. And is because I've spent my whole life watching New Mexico go downhill. And why? You know, I didn't know all the issues at that point in time, but I've learned a lot, and I want the public to be happy with where our monies go. And they're not, when they drive by Silver Springs area and see what they see, and they see our habitat staff there, and they're going, well, you fenced it off, but what's going on here?
Well, I think the group should know, so that maintenance advice that the committee came up with a few years back, that really made the federal agencies accountable. And so like, they're still in the works, like to bring, you know, a large scale water project to you all. But it's taken time, like, because it used to be, you know, free for, like, I'll just be honest, it was a total free for.
Was being used to pay salaries.
Yeah.
all
And so that change was absolutely necessary. That's probably one of the best things that's happened in this program, like, since it was restructured. And so, you know, anyways, like, yeah, they're still in the works. I just want to make sure. Okay, good.
Okay, I want to make a comment that's just partially tongue in cheek. One of the best things Game and Fish could do to support riparian areas, to send out your wildlife people and identify additional New Mexico meadow jumping mice, Amos mountain salamanders, and nesting goshawks, because then you'd have the Endangered Species Act, which in my personal experience with Forest Service people gives them the backbone to tell the permittees to keep on the cows the hell.
But yeah, so, I mean, if there was interest from the group, like to create, you know, maybe a subcommittee to look into some type of advice on what we need to include or have as part of these presentations and get in contact with folks, I mean, you know, you could.
I would be a part.
I think there is interest, because it'd be good to know, like, we hear, well, we've got a willing permittee. Right, well, that could mean a lot of things. I mean, you've got somebody who's a horrible permittee, who's willing to let me do this. Right, or at least not get away.
Different motives.
Or you've got a really good permittee, who's all in favor of it, and is contributing. You know, even within some of the district offices, the biology and range work hand in hand, and others, they're. So kind of like, that's your problem.
Yeah.
And so it'd be nice to know what sort of relationship there is, what sort of support. You know, is the range program pitching in money or not? Or they just view this as a wildlife problem? Even though the problem was caused by inappropriate cattle management.
Okay, just a comment, this is for Art Wilmer as well. Trout Unlimited has a funded state employee whose job is to be a liaison to grazing permittees. And he's worked with some of them to, and Trout Unlimited has funded it to build water drinkers in the upland areas to give the cattle less excuse to be down at riparian areas. And so Toner Mitchell's his name. He's worked really hard to form personal relations with some of the permittees. So he would be a good, he's an advocate for permittees, and so he would be someone who would be good for this committee to hear from. What things work for him.
Well, if you all want to create a committee, so there are some limitations, so you can't have a quorum. So the limit would be 4 people maximum, and then we need some type of a task. That anyone could make a motion for that, once we identify who the committee is going to be.
With that task, or to better understand the correlation of range management, HSP projects.
Or just to get more information about
Yeah.
the range management situation that
I think
for
that
the district that the project is embedded in.
Try and make a more informed decision.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you're not throwing good money after bad, if you're just gonna, you're gonna restore this area and it's gonna turn the cows loose on. you know, versus they're gonna restore this area and then manage it differently.
Yeah, we're not asking, we wouldn't want to get to the point where we're asking them not to you know, protect the areas, you know, we want them to help. The other part was fencing and things to that nature, these big areas. I'm sorry, but if you've got a big area and you forest drain it, the wildlife isn't tearing it down. They can get over it and under it, do whatever they need to, because it's a big area, and if they're in it and predators or something are coming from the other way, they've got plenty of room to be able to go away from it and then get over the fence. I love pipe fencing, I like the concept of it, it's strong, it's impermeable for the most part, but it's changed. Our SGSP funds are so small in a way that, you know, now the new norm is 3 times the amount of what a fence is. You know, if we had some type of cooperation from a permittee that was like, yeah, I will help keep that fence maintained to where my cattle don't get in there, you know, because I want the riparian area well too. I don't see that as a thing that couldn't be attainable on a lot of permittings. You know, if they're letting us in there anyway, we just need some cooperation so that it's not as expensive for us either. But, you know, you get a small containment around a catchment, you know, 2 acres or whatever, and you get a herd of elk in there, and then you get a predator, a truck or whatever, hunter come in there. They can't get out of that thing fast enough, and then they'll mow it down, you know, and get tangled up in it and things to that nature. But I don't want us to, I think we should be able to use fencing when we need it and can afford it, you know, instead of just going all out and buying a Cadillac, you know. But yeah, I don't want it to be a detriment to anything. I want it to be something that promotes partnership.
Would there be any volunteers who are interested in being in this committee? Jimmy, John? So those 3,
I mean, expertise is important, you know, because I'm not an expert. I just know what I see and what I read, you know, and I just like to know, you know, is there any way we can make our HSP dollars, make everybody happy with it, you know?
So to kind of formalize what the task would be, are we kind of settling like on better informing the CAC about range, influence and factors and projects, and potentially coming back to the full committee with recommendations on what should be included in future projects, like is kind of the main task, and then any other fact finding.
I would think so.
Yeah, so, and it stays within our reviews. Maybe, right?
Yeah.
To anyone,
Right.
situation, but we can't decide
What's coming in front
what
of you.
information would help us to be better informed.
What would be the committee's process in getting to that thing? I guess that would be my.
Well, the way that it worked in the past, so the subcommittee took the time that they needed to come up with their recommendations. And then in a formal public meeting, they presented that to the full committee. Everyone discussed it in public presence, there was public comment. And then there was a vote.
And if we implemented or wanted to implement something like in the CAC guidelines, then we voted on it at that point. That's what we did, you know, for getting information. I would hope we could, you know, set up Zoom meeting or something, or a personal meeting, but just little meetings that it can be spur of the moment.
Yeah, the subcommittee could be completely autonomous. They could, meet freely, you could converse readily about.
Right, if we tried to do it as a full committee, we have to have the meeting 2 weeks in advance notice and all that, and it's too hard.
That I'm just trying to figure out the process for getting the information that we want to provide that guidance.
To be, we ultimately, whatever we agreed on, would then become a requirement that needs to be part of the proposal.
And yeah, I agree with that. I'm just thinking of getting there, who, we gonna contact Forest Service people, and sit down with
I
them.
mean, that's a process thing. I'm not sure where we
sure how
go.
to go through with that.
You have some specific projects where the questions came up, could that be a starting spot?
Sure.
Go to those people.
So, I mean, there's some questions that I have for all of these projects, whether it's, they're, potential livestock management issues that at least contributed to the problem.
That is probably a great starting point, because then that would give you.
How are those? Have those been addressed? Or are they going to be addressed? Right?
Yeah, no emotional.
We're asking us to buy fences, your range
That whatsoever.
pitching.
You can't have a conversation like that.
No, and that's,
So, yeah, I mean, if you wanted to.
It might not go anywhere.
But yeah, I mean, there may not be a deliverable.
But I think the concept of the committee, have a subcommittee doing it. We're not just the public, we're actually one of the partners' wings. We're not, even though all of the mandates say that rangeland is to be, and, everything that decisions and things are to include interested public, even,
So if you want, you could put it to a vote and, so we've got Jimmy, yourself. And Manny, who, potentially volunteered, so you basically just say, you move to create a subcommittee with that task. And if we get the second, the votes, you guys will be free to explore that.
and I'd love to have more involvement too. I mean, you leave here.
I'm on the fence here because I'm still a little foggy in here, and I would hate to. I'd hate to put Kathy on. But I think Kathy has the most experience in communicating with, she's not on the committee, I agree with that, but she's a public person that has the most experience in dealing with all those different agencies and range people, more than I do.
Okay, but what are you saying?
So what kind of advice would you get for us to approach the people in these agencies, who and where?
Oh.
And, what's the said way to get to?
I think you have I think it's. The hardest part is you're going to get different answers from different offices.
Right.
And different agencies, because BLM and Forest Service do not run on the same lines. They're completely different agencies and one's USDA, the other one's DOI. Department of Interior. So, they're gonna handle things differently, and then because grazing can, if you go in and just ask questions, right? If you just go in, but if you're going in as, this is how we're going to make our decisions, this is how we're going to make a policy, then everybody's going to talk to you. They may or may not talk to you because they may have to put you through the state. But like BLM, if it becomes political at all, they'll put you through the state and have you go through the state office. But if you just go in and say, hey, I just want to learn. We're trying to make decisions and I just want to learn how you guys do your processes. How does this work? Lay it out for me. And do you work with wildlife? And you guys already know all this, right? But the biggest thing to understand is if you go in and say, we're making policy, then they're gonna send you through the state office. BLMS.
Yeah.
I don't know what the force.
I don't know that we're making a policy, like when I started this, on this committee, we would get proposals that had very little landscape scale context. Right, and we just said, we wanna know, I don't care if it's BLM that's doing stuff across the fence. Or if you know anything about state land office, we wanna know how this fits into a bigger picture. And we kind of got more standardization in our proposals. We got all the information that we wanted, and we had a lot of that we did in a public meeting. So these are the minimum things we want to have in these types of proposals. For me, at least, how I'm envisioning this is just adding the range context to these proposals. Nothing else. We don't need to talk to BLM. We don't need to go talk to the Forest Service. This is the information we want. Does the rain shop buy in on this, right? Or did they just stepping out, or they just not getting in the way, right? Do they have a willing permittee? Do they have a permittee that they got really good relationships with, or is it just willing to let Game and Fish come in and contract the project, right? If the problems that are being addressed are caused by management issues that have to do with livestock raising, how have those been addressed, and if they haven't, are they gonna be addressed? Just that sort of information needs to be in part of the proposals.
And so you want to do it proposal by proposal.
Yeah, they need to bring their proposal.
So when we first get the proposals, we can look at it and then go,
They would already be
we
there.
need, well, rather, well, it may already be there, or,
Well, we can require what they put in. the
Yeah.
proposal, right?
you can require that, okay.
We
I see
dramatically
that.
changed the proposals.
I'm just
Some
wondering.
were super uninformative, others had bits of information, and we had tons of questions on every proposal. Now, the proposals, the questions we have tend to focus on the project rather than on these details that have to do with scale and context and things like that. So I just see this as being another part of the
Layer.
context, the management context of where this project is being proposed. And it just gives us more information, and then if you've got projects that are on the fence and we're deciding between one or the other, might come into inform your decisions, it might not. It's just, it certainly can't hurt to have more specific information and require it as being part of the proposals like we did with the other things. that we put in.
Yeah, could you, look at some of the funded projects too, because we've got a backlog of ones that didn't get funded, right? I remember there were some exclosures down around Hatch and stuff, things like that. But I mean, some of the funded ones, you could actually ask that question too. I mean, as another perspective.
Yeah, the tough thing is, some of that perspective is the cattle are back in there doing the
Well,
thing they've
but
always done.
Wouldn't that be good to know, right?
Well, yeah, and unfortunately, we know it. Already.
So I guess what I'm thinking is that you go and look at the projects that you have or have had in the past and find the contact people on those projects, and that's the people you go to ask questions.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Because they're the people that want to do it, and if they can't ask the questions, well, but you're not gonna get the answer from somebody above.
I think even the context of today's meeting, just the discussion that happened when we got to those two closure projects, I mean. That information may or may not have changed how those, what information needed to be included, I think that the subcommittee could get at that. But maybe that's a way of looking at it, it's like, what would the range staff need to tell you? Convincingly to make you prioritize something like that, and then, forcing that that's included in this project for evaluation.
Yeah, Soda Springs is a good, I think, a really good example. Because it has multiple elements to it that, is it's upland drainage into that spring and the spring, which is a natural water, a natural source. And the degradation is there. We've had some projects that this riparian area is degraded to almost you can't even recognize it as a riparian area. Why? Why are we to that point? And,
Why is the rest rotation not rested, and why is,
we don't understand.
at what point do they go ahead and continue to graze this, even though it's
Even
not supposed to be?
it's below standards.
Yeah.
That's what the public the people that I know, that's their biggest issue is what's going on here? How come the land is so degraded? And then you get here and we're seeing projects, and it's increasingly, the projects are specifically laying out the cattle, and they're hammering it in that sense to get us to just say, yeah, let's get this, stop the cattle, this fence them out, that's a great thing, but there's more to it than that. It's not just fencing them out, it's, let's collaborate and make it to where we can maybe use fences if we need to, help collaborate, we're partners in it. Why are we fighting them constantly when it's agreed to that they're gonna, we're gonna fence this riparian area and they agreed to it too, are they not actually agreeing to it, or? I mean, we just don't have anything.
So is Soda Springs, famous, what?
No,
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd contact Real Park and talk to their grazing guys and find out. And then maybe you get answers from BLM, so then you understand the grazing from them. And then have you had a Forest Service project that leaves right, go to the specific project and ask questions there.
That
And
could
then
help
you
us
guys
work
get,
what we're talking about.
then you get answers on how the Forest Service does the grazing.
And I'm just throwing it out there, but in terms of like coming up with what needs to be included with the proposals, you could really just come up with a list of questions that you have, or that you would ask.
That's
And-
what I'm envisioning. I mean, it's the work. Should be on the agencies doing the proposals,
Right.
right? Like when I write a proposal, I don't ask any agency. So. These are the things we want.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter that you grade your grazing programs maybe somewhat differently than this other group. These are the things we want to know that have to do with the context of. How livestock grazing either has or hasn't had an impact on whatever habitat project, and what the potential is. What the involvement of permittees in the range.
So if we did this committee, would it be okay to get, like, have the whole committee give, if they have any, things that they wanna know about or anything like that,
Well,
give it to the subcommittee so that they
We have
can work.
yeah, I mean, we could use
Yeah.
the context of today's meeting. This was recorded, so you know, we can punch up notes from this and get them to the subcommittee as a starting point. But then for any like full committee discussions on stuff, we'd probably need to have a public. Just to avoid any kind of long issues. And we could call those at any time, you know, if the subcommittee was ready to talk with the full group, if we want to wait till February, March meeting or another scheduled meeting. That's fine.
Right, but the whole committee can give an input for us to work
Today.
with.
Today.
Yeah.
But after today, or like outside of public meeting, then you
It's
guys
just a
are,
committee.
you have your task,
Gotcha.
the subcommittee acts.
Oh, I see, yeah. Well, I would motion to make a subcommittee for this issue.
Okay, and to clarify, we had volunteers from Jimmy, yourself, Manny, was there anyone else? We could take one more if someone else wanted to jump on. I'll jump on. Okay, and then leave, so.
Say that real quiet.
Okay, so then
Yay.
those four.
That's recorded.
I know, it's, I'm still,
So I'll clean up the motion a little bit, so.
as long as I'm not,
We won't do
as
it.
long as I'm not any kind of chairman or anything, was fine.
I just.
We won't have a leader.
I just need to make clear why I'm not wanting to be on there, is because with backcountry hunters and anglers, policy is my thing. And we have conflicts about policy with the state, everybody, so I'm not gonna be part of that committee.
I belong to no organization. Like Teddy Roosevelt said, I won't belong to any organization that will have.
So I'll clean up the motion a little bit. So it's been moved to create a subcommittee. With Jimmy Kane, John Pierce, Manuel Esperance, Leaf On. With the task of information gathering on range management in the context of current habitat conditions and future restoration potential. And creating guidance for future habitat stamp projects that are presented.
Perfect.
I think it's more.
JP and
information.
chairman
I'd
and-
like to see in the proposal.
Yes.
I think you propose anything wrong.
Yeah.
Right, but we just want some basic information.
To be included.
Like before, when people were proposing building a new water catchment. We wanted to know what the nearest other water catchment was, not just on BLM land if it was a BLM proposal, but on Forest Service, if there was Forest Service. projects. So we want to know, what the context, broader context of the project is. It's, I think that's what this is, it's just, there's some information we keep having to ask questions about. And to avoid having to ask this question. This one. Part of the normal proposal.
Do we have a second? Everybody. It's been properly moved and seconded, so we'll just go by ayes if you're in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No opposition, so it's passed, so the subcommittee is created, the four of you are free to communicate with each other on the topic. And at any point, if you need anything from us, information wise, just reach out. If you need to call a public meeting because you're ready to present, reach out to Caitlin and I, and we'll get that set up. Otherwise, yeah, communicate all you want. And let us know when you're ready with whatever you want.
Yeah, and even wait until the next meeting to have it as part of the agenda would be fine as well.
Yeah, that's whatever you all want to do. And if you want it as part of the agenda, just inform me so that.
Okay, good.
Well, I think that's everything that we have for all of you today. It's been a really productive meeting. I really appreciate everyone coming here. Yeah, essentially everyone here in person, which is pretty cool. But yeah, thank you all for coming. And if you need anything from me, please let me know. We'll be in touch on the field trip. And if we have a motion to adjourn, we can see if it passes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Aye, if you're in favor of adjourning.
Aye.
Nays if you're opposed.
And if anybody would like a piece of ahi tuna, I have some in the ice chest in the back.
Heck yeah.
I'll be sure.
Thanks again, everyone.
Oh, you can't have it all.